Let's go. All right, so we are back for another week of Bionicle book learning, Bionicle 104, this fourth part. Back after 2 weeks because we got hurricaned last week, so there's a bit of a delay. Chris is not here, and so he'll have extra homework later. And then Jason is on the way, and he'll miss out on the boring stuff. So we are now out of 2004. So quick recap, we have gone through the Quest for the Masks, the Borak Call, Mask of Light, all running up to 2003. And last time we talked entirely about the 2004 story year, where the first half was Quest for the Great Discs, and the second half was the Great Cataclysm, with Makuta showing up and turning out to be Tragaduma and putting all the Tauren in pods, and then the Toa Metru had to try and escape. So this will lead us to Bionicle year 2005. And the big things we're going to be looking at is Hordika and Altrock. Because as we reach the year 2005, it is time to get dark and edgy more than Shadow the Hedgy. So in the 2005 story year, it's going to be focusing on the Great Rescue. We actually last time covered the fifth book of adventures, Voyage of Fear. So we covered that, and I'll briefly go back over that. But the 2005 story set was comprised of 6 books and then 6 comics. And so this is also an interesting point for the Bionicle series, because this is the first year we're going to be getting actual Lego play sets, as well as the traditional Bionicle line here. So we'll start with book 5 is a very quick recap. The Toa Metru are escaping on a Vaki transport. They've got 6 Matoran spears supporting it for buoyancy. They run into a bunch of different, horrible Leviathan, Rahi, sea beasts. Fight off Mavra, a Matoran who just ran off with a bunch of these Rahi, and his army of Crawley. Also, big note, I'm just fucking stupid, because I was looking in this book for the Crawley last time, and I totally just mind melted myself, because I was like, wait a second, Crawley aren't fucking Rahi. They're not animals, so why would they be in the book about Rahi? They're just robots. I don't know why, I just didn't think of that in the moment. So I'm dumb. That's why Crawley is not in there. It wouldn't be in here in the first place. They run into the Crawley, they fight the Crawley, they destroy the Crawley, they manage to get past everything. They lose one of the Tauren pods in the water and make it to the brand new island of Matanui, this giant tropical wasteland, after having caused a cave-in to shut down the entrance from which they came. So this will bring us to part 6. This is Maze of Shadows, the 6th book in the series. They also did make a video game for the Game Boy Advance. It was for the Advance. Yes, it was for the Game Boy Advance. That followed a lot of the plot lines for this. Maze of Shadows starts with the Toa Metru now exploring the island of Metru Nui, because they're looking around and they're going, okay, well, let's go ahead and start exploring this place and figuring out where we want to set up our villages. Kama, the Toe of Water, is, hey, we landed right here in this kind of swampy marsh area. I'm going to set up the new place for the Gamatoran here. And the other Toa Metru start, going around. Also, one thing I also kind of forgot to mention is that, remember how way back I talked about how the Lamatoran are just a bunch of jungle hippies and they speak weird pigeon language, and they all just call it tree speak is the shorthand is the term for it. That is not exclusive to the Lamatoran on Matanui. In Metru Nui, they also had their own weird way of speech pattern, and they just called it shoot speak, since the Lamatoran were in charge of all the shoots.
Is this like a Creole or more like a pigeon?
It's more like it's very. A lot of the words are very redundant. In the same way as like ATM machine is automated teller machine. They'll say things like, I'm going to be a Toa hero, but Toa is the word for hero. So I'm going to be a hero. Or there'll be no ground walking, only wind flying. And it's like this weird mishmash But everyone generally understands it. That is another thing too for the Matoran language. There are specifically Matoran words that mean specific things. Like I said, Kanoka I think Kanoka is just the word for disc, but they call them Kanoka discs. And Kanohi is the word for mask, but they call them Kanohi masks. So there, in the Matoran language in general, there's a bunch of redundancies. Quick note on that. Greg Farshti also said that the characters he hated writing for the most were the Lay Matoran, because he hated writing this really weird second language thing he didn't want to do. So they're looking around, and unlike the chutes and systems in Lay Metru, there's just a bunch of jungle. So Matau is just not having a good time, and he's like walking through the jungle. He's like, "Oh, look at that! There's this. Oh, I see. There's a red cable there. They must have chutes here too." No, it's just a vine. It just leads into more vines and stuff. And Lake Koro in general, like the reason why they live up in trees in Montanui is because everything on the ground is just marsh. It's all just swampy and muddy and humid. So they live in trees where it's not that. Up in the icy mountain ranges of what will eventually become Kowahi and Kokoro's village there, Toa Metru Nuju is walking around and kind of contemplating everything that happened thus far. And he thinks about the days when he wanted to be a scholar and how he was talking to his mentor about, how one day he too would become a great scholar and all this stuff. But his mentor gave him the piece of advice that it's not so much about what you do when you become a great scholar, but the lessons and adventures you learn along the way to get to that point. And he kind of reflects on this and takes that kind of nugget of wisdom to heart. And in doing so, names this giant mountain after his mentor, Mount Aihu. Toa Vakama is exploring these volcanic regions there. And the thing that he is most focused on is all he's doing is looking for the places that he's going to set up his, Takoro, whatever this one place, with the explicit purpose that it will become an impenetrable it will become an impenetrable fortress, because he knows that even though they sealed up Makuta in that rock of solid protodermis, Makuta will probably find a way to get out and he will come back. So he's looking at everything like that's a weak point over there. You would have to fortify that because he wants it to be like this giant fortress that everyone could come to if they need to. Which is why in the earlier years, like Takoro is the most well-defended and well-built city for those purposes.
So was that like a prequel, the book and the did they?
So everything we talked about last time and this time, these are all prequels.
Okay.
So this is all the Turaga, mostly Turaga Vakama retelling these stories. Though I want to say Voyage of Fear was not told by Turaga Vakama because he was just tired and he wanted to take a break. And so Turaga no Kama, Turaga of Water, was the one who recanted the tales here. However, Turaga Vakama comes back for Maze of Shadows to start telling this story. So they're inspecting the island. You have a question?
No, I was just making sure that
Gotcha. And everyone's looking around. Toa of Stone, or the Toa Metru of Stone Onua is kind of looking around in the desert, and he's looking at some caves, and all of a sudden, a Nui Jaga starts running out. Those are the scorpions from before that he's like, oh man, these Nui Jaga, I remember them back there, they have a really poisonous stinger, they're going to be hard to fight, and he's bracing himself to get ready for this fight, and this Nui Jaga keeps running up, and it just runs right past him. And he's like, well, that was weird, because at this point, he had been pushed up towards, the back end of this cavern, and he's like, where is that thing going? And the Nui Jaga just jumps off, because it was a cliff face, and jumps off to its death. And Toa Onua, Metru Onua, is like, that's really weird. Why would it do that? So he kind of looks down into the darkness, and he's like, whatever. He's like, and he understands instinctively that Rahi are animals. They're ruled by primal thoughts and urges, and that that thing that the Nuijaga wasn't running to get away from him, but it seemed like it was running in fear of whatever the hell was down there. So at this point, all the Toa Metro meet back up, and Turaga Vakama is like, all right, guys, so, how's everything going? How's, whatever. And Toa Matau is like, you know what? Man, does anyone want to trade regions with me? I just don't like the swamp stuff. Like, it's just not going to be, there's too much jungle vegetation for me to fly through. It's just not really going to work. Anyone want to trade with me? And they're all kind of just chit-chatting about it. And Toa Metro Vakama comes up and goes, all right, guys, here's the deal. We need to find a way back to Metro Nui, because we need to find a way to get all the Matoran back. Ono was talking about that he kind of felt like there was a passage that might lead there because a Nuijaga came up, and none of us have seen any other Rahi yet, which gives us reason to believe that Nuijaga might have come from Metro Nui, might have traveled up some other cavern. So that might be a way down. That being said, if we're all going to go down there, I think we all need to create Toa Stones, in the same way that Toa Lacan did. And immediately, everyone is against this. Because everyone goes, okay, well, what are you talking about? Toa Lacan became a Turaga because he made the Toa Stones. If we make the Toa Stones, we're going to turn into Turaga, and then we're not going to be able to go and save them. And Toa Lacan was like, okay, well, we don't know that. All we know is that at some point after we became Toa, he became a Turaga. But he was able to make the Toa Stones before that. We all received our Toa Stones while he was still a Toa, yes.
For the purpose of Toa Stone is just to create a Toa out of one of the...
Correct. For the purpose of Toa Stones a Toa will infuse some of their Toa energy into a stone that can then be used to turn other Matoran into Toa. There doesn't seem to be any specific limit on how many Toa Stones one Toa can create, but we do know that Toa energy is a finite pool, as opposed to like their elemental energy, which they can regenerate over time. Yes.
So
yes.
Does it make them weaker to do it?
Eventually it will start to deplete their general abilities. And the point where they run out of Toa power is the point where the Toa will become Turaga.
Like Lacan.
Yes, like Turaga Lacan. So they're all just standing around and because of course this is an idea made by Vakama, Onua is immediately like just poo-pooing this entire idea. He's like, Vakama, that's a stupid idea. We're not going to do that. He's like, even it was like, how do we know it's going to work? We don't. It's like if we all make these Toa Stones and then we all become Turaga, we're going to be able to do it. And Vakama just goes, all right, we'll do it. And he just grabs a stone, puts his fist to it, and imparts some of his Toa energy into it. And everyone just watches to see if anything happens first, and then it's very clear that Vakama is perfectly fine. And he's created a Toa Stone. And then everyone's like, one by one, they all start, he's like, well, Kama did it, I'll do it. And even up until the very end, Onua is like, well, I'll do it, just because, Kama did it and everybody else did it. And Vakama's like, no, you'll do it because it's the right thing to do. At this point, Vakama is starting to really push as the team leader. Even though this whole time, no one has officially said, Vakama is the team leader. And at every turn, Onua is just, well, who said you were the team leader? Everyone's kind of just like silently accepted it because nobody's come up with anything better.
Yes, sure.
Sandy, don't they know red means you're the leader?
Apparently, yeah, no. That's still one of my favorite things from like Bionicle groups. It was like, boys with this color have a 100% chance of being the leader with no qualifications. At this point, Vakama's really starting to push and be like, no, we've got to go back now. We've got to go save the Matoran. So after this, the Toa Metru have created the Toa Stones, and they all travel throughout the island to find some place that they will hide the Toa Stones, with the idea that should some Matoran ever find them in the future and they need more Toa, they'll have an ability to get more Toa here. So as the Toa Metru get finished up with that, they decide they're going to go travel down that cavern. They start walking through it slowly and descending into the dark. Toa Wenua is up at the front with his mask of night vision. and he's just shining a beam on stuff to kind of give everyone else a chance to see as they continue to descend. And at one point, they walk in far enough, and they see like a silvery pool on the cavern floor, and they're like, "Is that what I think it is?" And Ton Metro Nokama is like, "Yeah, that looks like it is. That looks like it's energized protodermis." Which at the same point, energized protodermis had been used by Gomatorans, and they were studying it, and they were trying to make like regular protodermis and turn that into energized protodermis to kind of see what they could do with it. But they never really got anywhere with it. Energized protodermis is still just known as this like very volatile and destructive force. You know, it's a 50-50 chance. And then the other guys are like, well, you know, what's energized protodermis? And Tomatal's like, man, you know, I'll just go ahead and, you know, check that out. And they're like, all right, that's cool. You might get transformed into an even better hero, or you might die horribly. And he's like, the dying horribly part? I don't know about that one. So they continue onwards down into this cave, and as they do, you know, they're encountering some Rahi here and there, and they eventually run into a Krenua. Krenua were the predecessor robots of the Vaki, the authoritarian guard things, before the Vaki were like the finalized product. But the Krenua had this interesting ability that it could basically turn itself into protodermic dust to avoid getting hit. So it would just like turn into dust and then reform itself. So the Toa Metru are, you know, fighting this here and there. And eventually Vakama waits and just throws a disc at it to make it, you know, disperse to avoid it, and then superheats it and turns it into glass. And the other Toa are like, oh no, I don't know if we should keep going. And Vakama's like, no, we keep going. Come on, guys. So I keep going. Matau also kind of walks up to it, and one of the big things they would say with Vaki is that you have two options with Vaki, and that was surrender or run. And more often than not, you like to capture. And Matau is like, let me just give you a little secret. Now with more Toa around, there's not just two options anymore, and knocks the Krenua over and turns it into glass shards. They continue walking on, feeling for the walls, and all of a sudden, they stumble across a giant hive of Borak that are all just lining the walls. They've stumbled across a Borak nest. And they're all immediately like, oh crap, it's a Borak. They're like, we gotta be careful not to wake them up. And Wenu was like, no, don't worry about it. It's like, they don't wake up. At least by nothing we were able to find. Because Borak were first found when archivists were digging deep enough under Metronui, making archives. They just stumbled across a nest, and they never were able to actually wake up any Borak. But they did discover there that they were mechanical. They discovered they had a Krana, but they had no idea what they were for or anything because they never saw a live Borak. Interesting point to note, Mavra from Voyage of Fear originally hypothesized that Borak, because they were completely mechanical, that they didn't seem to have been constructed, they didn't seem to have been built by anything, that maybe instead of being some construction made by somebody else, that they were an evolved form of some species that just surpassed organic state and became that. But back to the present. So they're looking across along the walls, and they see carvings of, you know, the Borak queens, the Balrog, dipping Krana, little things, into pools of energized protodermis. But they can't really read a lot of the other text on there. It's just so old. And even then, they're like, we don't have time. It's worn away. We don't have time. We got to keep pushing forward. As they do, they stumble upon a Muwaka, one of those giant tiger cats from before, but it is horribly like enlarged and has giant steel protodermic spikes growing out of its body. This is not normal. So the Toa all get ready to fight, and Nokama's like, hey guys, hold up. And starts like making growling noises at the Muwaka and trying to talk to it. And they're like, what's she saying? And they're like, I have no idea. Wait for her to be done. And she's like, and so the Muwaka just growls, snarls a bit, and then walks off. And Okama's like, and they're like, well, what did it say? And she was like, all it said was turn back now. It was a warning, you know, turn back all ye who would enter here. But the Toametru don't. And they continue just walking through, and they're fighting more and more rocky. and they start finding more and more of these horribly mutated Rahi. At some point, they come up atop like a cliffside or like a cavern, and they're looking down, and Toa Nuju uses his telescopic scope on his mask to kind of zoom in at some of the Rahi, and he's inspecting all these dead Rahi on the floor, but he's like, there's no marks on them. It doesn't look like they were attacked, but also, these are Rahi living on land in a cave that they're dead now, but some of them have gills. Like, they should be underwater. Like, how do they wind up here? And it's at this point that our good friend, the Rahi Nui, transports and teleports into the cave with the Toa and can smell the Toa energy, so it starts lurking and hunting after them. As a quick refresher, the Rahi Nui is that big thing that's made of like the Tarakava punchy arms and the Nui Jaga stinger tail and all the different Rahi from like year one. It's that thing again, which shows up and immediately starts fighting the Toa. So the Toa are just like, all right, cool, energy blast, energy blast, energy blast, and the Rahi Nui is just like, that's good, keep feed me. Because he's feeding off of the elemental energy and slowly growing in size. What's interesting, so the Toa are all kind of doing their best to fight this thing out, and they're all falling one by one and trying to catch up. And I believe it's Nuju at this point that looks on the ground, and he notices like the footprints of the Rahi Nui, and realizes that the Rahi Nui isn't, the actual footprints aren't actually getting bigger. Even though the Rahi Nui is increasing in size, it's not, the footprints it's making aren't getting bigger. So this is a weird conundrum. Additionally, as they're trying to fight it, they realize that, you know, the Rahi Nui is able to like shrink and grow and other stuff, and they realize the Rahi Nui has all the powers of the Kanoka discs. That's what its powers are, and it can also absorb the elemental energies of the Toa. It is at this point that Nuju is like, hey guys, cool thing I found out. It's not increasing in actual size, or it's not increasing in mass, just in size. And Tragavakama is like, what? Or I think maybe it was Onawa. And Nokama goes to like jump in front of them, and the Rahi Nui's stinger tail lashes out and just pierces through Nokama. Oh. And she slumps down immediately. And Vakama's like, okay, Nuju, it's just me and you left. What do we do? And they both kind of have the idea at the same time. They go, wait a second. If the Rahi Nui's mass is staying the same, but its size is increasing, then the correct thing to do is feed it more energy. So they keep feeding it more and more and more elemental energy, and it grows bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until it just dissipates. Because what I figured out was, if they could increase the actual mass of the Rahi Nui wasn't increasing, even though its size was. So they just increased its size to the point that its atoms couldn't keep it together since its size was exceeding its mass, and it just dissipated. Yeah. And they're like, cool. That was really, really like weird, like to read, but I was like, that's a really interesting take on like a physics subject. So they're like, all right, we beat it, but Nokama is gravely wounded, and they're go over to her. She's not responsive. Her heart light's flashing. They're like, okay, she's gonna die. And they're like, we need to turn back. And Kama goes, no, I understand this has happened, but we need to keep going forward. And Matau and Onwa are like, are you serious? Like, we need to go back. We need to at least give her some comfort. And Nuju pipes up as well, and he goes, no, guys. He's like, if we go back now, we forfeit the chance that there might be some kind of anti-venom or antidote or something we can find in Metro Nui for her. I hate to admit it, but we got to keep going forward. So they're carrying her, and they keep going forward. And as they delve in deeper, they're starting to see more like vegetation and roots along the walls. And once again, more dead Rahi. They're fighting way through until they reach a point where there's a large amount of... I skipped over a little piece right here. Before the Rahi Nui fought, Matau decided to fly ahead of everyone and kind of scope things out. And ended up, he's like, oh, look, there's these little, these little Rahi, I'm going to fight them off. And then something came along and fused him into a stone wall. And when everyone came up around him, they were like, oh man, Matau's been fused into a stone, like he's part of it. And Onawa, very, very, like, with surgical precision, was able to will the rock to move away and break its bonds with Matau. Because there's like, he's talking about it, he's like, it's actually like physically merged with him. Like if I mess this up, Matau's gonna die. I was able to break it off there, and a little bit, and after that, they're continuing through, and they. So anyway, so jumping back to where we were, there's all this vegetation around, and all of a sudden these vines start coming out, and they're like, "Oh, Toametru," and they're like, "Oh man, that doesn't sound good. Who else is here?" And the vines start speaking, and they're like, "Wait, it's the Morbuzak plant. That can't be. We already killed you in Metrodui." And it's like, ha, ha, Morbuzak? More like Mubitsak. I am Karzani. Karzani also being that same nightmare hell realm that we talked about before that the Matoran believe in if they're bad workers. He goes, I'm the Karzani. And they're like, the what now? And he's like, look, you're like, basically what you're walking into is Makuta, one of Makuta's many layers. Everything you've seen up here is just him experimenting with Rahi and stuff, and he created me before the Morbuzak. But I had too much intelligence and independence and free will, so he cast me aside, whereas the Morbuzak was more complacent and able to be controlled. He's like, so here's the deal, guys. I need you to do me a favor. They're like, well, why should we listen to you? They're like, well, one of you is dying, and I have an antidote that can help her. So you're going to help me, or you're all going to die. It could be either way. They all kind of look at each other and they're like, all right. How do we know you even have an antidote in the first place? One of these vines come up and kind of injects Nokama with something. And all of a sudden she jump starts. Like it's that scene in Pulp Fiction when they stab her with adrenaline. It's pretty much just, oh, where am I? What's going on? And so the Karzani plant is like, look, I've given her like a few hours to live off that. If you complete this task for me, I will give you a complete antidote. So they all kind of go, well, what do you want? And they're like, take this little black vial I'm going to give you, and you're going to go deeper into Makuta's lair and find his pool of energized protodermis. All I need you to do is get me a sample of the energized protodermis. And then I'll just become bigger and better. And this is like a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. So the Toa are very begrudgingly like, we don't have much of a choice. So, okay. So the Toa Metru now continue on down further into the lair, and they eventually get, seeing more and more monstrosities and fighting through Rahi for what seems like hours, and they finally get to a giant lair of Makuta with a giant silvery pool in the middle of the room. And the Toa go, look, that's it, that's where we gotta go. And they start walking up to the pool, and as they're about to dip in this vial, the pool starts talking. And it's like, Toametru, what's going on, guys? I am the energized protodermis. And they're like, the what now? They're like, oh yeah, I'm the energized protodermis, and I know why you're here. I know you need a sample, but I can't do that for you guys, so you guys just need to turn around, or I'll just have to destroy you. And they're like, well, that's cool, but we can't do that. So we really need a sample. Isn't there any way you could share anything? And they're like, I have no reason to share any of my precious resource with insignificant beings and lesser minds than the great me. And they're like, well, wait a second. Like, aren't you, like, doesn't Makuta use you to, and they're like, Makuta? He is feeble in mind compared to me. I am the big brain here. And they go, all right, well, look, bud, we're really going to need that sample. So we're going to do this the hard way or the easy way. And the energized protodermis kind of takes on a shape resembling the Makuta and starts to engage them in battle. And so it's, taunting them. It's, throwing out different strikes and tendrils of energized protodermis. And they're very much like, hey, if you get hit by anything from him, like, you're probably going to get destroyed. Like, it's one and dones. And they realize that there's like these stone pillars that are kind of holding up the cavern that they're in. And so they all start taunting it and coming at it and throwing all these different at it, and it starts confusing it. And as they're doing it, they're just breaking these until there's like 2 left. And they go, all right, energized protodermis being, we can destroy these pillars. It will bring down the roof on all of us, kill us all, and destroy your pool. Or you can give us a sample. It's that easy, bud. It's that easy. And the energized protodermis being is like, I suppose I can be benevolent enough to let you have a sliver of my power. And so they go up and they collect a little vial of it. Yes.
Why is every fucking thing they run into underground here a fucking pseudo-intellectual jackass?
Man, it's almost, I don't know, man. It's like they hang around each other. Makuto is a pseudo-intellectual jackass, the energized protodermis, the more Buzak, the Karzani, all the villains. They're all just like, Durher, big brain time. I am the big brain boy. I am the biggest brain. And they all like think that they're using each other, but I mean, the real big brain actually here is Makuta. Like, anyway. So, they start to leave, and as they do, the energized protodermis being is going to throw out some energy to destroy the Toa Metru, and the Toa Metru just bring down the other two pillars and crash the cavern in, and they just walk away. So they start going back to so as they're on the way, like, there's enough vines on the walls. The Karzani plant already knows they succeeded. It's like, good, thanks for helping me, friends. And they're like, we're not your friends. And they're like, oh, but I help you. You help me. It's great. So they finally get back to the root of the Karzani plant. He's like, all right, Toa Metru, hand the vial over. I need it right. I need it here now, please. And the Toa Metru are like, oh, hold on. You said you were going to heal Nokama. You need that first. It's like, but I need the proto. Is like, hold on, bud. If you don't heal Nokama right now, we're just going to break this vial on the ground. And he's like, you would. And he's like, oh, but we would. And so the Morpheus moves the Karzani plant goes, fine, throws up a vine, has this fruit on there, and Nokama eats it and is immediately healed. And they go, okay, we'll honor our part of the bargain. And they give the Karzani plant the energized protodermis. And it goes, good, and pours it on itself. And then the Karzani plant bursts into flames and just immediately starts burning and yes, Zach.
Would it be correct to describe it as it went up in flames?
Yes, it did go up in flames. And it's howling in pain. And it goes, how cruel and ironic. The promise of life only brought death. Because energized protodermis is this be-all, end-all substance. It can give empowered life, it can create things, or it can destroy them. It's, like I said, it's like a you're either destined to not die or you just do. And so they go, well, that sure was a thing. And that's the end of Maze of Shadows. This will bring us to Web of the Visorak. Titties. We're getting there. I promise. We're getting to bonk titties. This book is book 7, Web of the Visorak. So the Toa Metru are now exploring more and more of the chambers of Makuta's lair, and they're finding more of his inventions and more of his, deceased Rahi experiments. And Bakama's in a room when he sees, a bunch of Vaki transport parts and goes, okay, we can use this to get back to Metru Nui. And as he's there, some giant flame elemental hell demon shows up in the room and just starts attacking Bakama. Bakama's immediate instinct, as a Toa of Fire, is to throw fire at it. And it just does nothing. It's just not working out. This is a point where Bakama goes, he's very quickly, like, his flames are being engulfed by this other fire elemental flames, and he is starting to, feeling like his Toa armor start to melt. And Bakama does a thing that he did back in, book 2, I think. I forgot to mention it last time. There's a point where Bakama had to, absorb a bunch of heat and then jet out. So Bakama just stands his ground and goes, I've only done this once before, but I'm a lot stronger now. And just starts slowly lowering the temperature in the room. Just absorbing every amount of heat he possibly can into his body. He's storing it. The room is getting colder and colder and colder. And the being's fires are starting to dwindle until it's just getting below freezing. And he's just absorbing so much heat. And finally the fire elemental just dies because it can't exist. And then Okama just just jets out this massive molten flame that just melts through 8 layers of rock wall. He has to expend all of it. And they go, okay, well, what was that? And he was like, it's just something. Now we've got transport parts. And they're like, okay, cool. Well, we can use these transport parts to get to these Vaki transport to Metru Nui. They're like, but we don't have any Matoran spheres here. Speaking of which, I forgot to mention. So remember how I mentioned a lot of the canisters and product packaging would do other stuff? One of the cool things was the Toa Metru canisters had these dome pieces, and you could take one of each and put them together and lock them, and they made Matoran spheres.
Oh.
And so I was like, okay, that's kind of neat. And so like, well, how are we going to make anything buoyant? We don't have anything that we can float on with this transport. Vakam was like, yeah, we do. And they look over to the dead roots of the Karzani plant, and they're like, all right, boys, let's get to chopping. They start chopping up the dead vines and roots, and they start leashing it together and make a giant raft to put the transport on. And they named this transport the Lacan 2, Electric Boogaloo, and start traveling across the sea. But as they are about halfway through, all of a sudden they're like, huge storms are coming in, and they're like, they're sitting on there, and they're looking off the distance, and Nuju is kind of zooming in with his telescopic lens. He's like, "Oh, guys, you're not gonna like what you see over here." And like, what? And they're like, "There's a bunch of rock shoe running around." They're like, "Archives must have got damaged. A bunch of raw here, probably in the city. Not much we can do." And they're like, and Maxwell's like, maybe I should fly over there and be, a vanguard, and just kind of scope it out and everything. And Kamal's like, no, we all go together. To hell with this storm, we're gonna make it over there. Vakama is slowly descending into his obsession with, and it is an obsession, with saving the Matoran. Because Vakama feels like he failed to save the Matoran before. He is the reason that Toa Lacan died. He wasn't able to save his city. Even though they defeated Makuta, the city was completely destroyed in the Great Cataclysm. And even then, they only escaped with 6 Matoran spheres, and one of them got lost. He is bound and determined. He's like, no, we don't wait for the storm to pass. The more time we wait, the more time it is that something could get into the Colosseum and destroy the Matoran spheres. We have to go now. And if you don't like it, suck it up. And everyone is just kind of like, we get, Vakama, that you are really intent about saving the Matoran and Metronui, but all of us are too. You don't need to lash out at us for that. We are all working towards the same goal. And we know that, you're doing the best you can with this and stuff, but like, you don't need to be a dick. And Vakama is just like, whatever, we go. So they're traveling through this storm, and eventually, the storm completely destroys the Vaki transport. They land up on the beach, and this is actually where the third movie will start. The third movie, Web of Shadows, is a weird kind of like amalgamations of the first part of part 7, a little bit of book 8, but mostly book 9 is just a novelization of that movie. It contains most of the events in there.
I'm excited about that movie.
So
Yes.
the Web of Shadows is not a mix of the Maze of Shadows and the Web of the Visorak.
I know, right? You would think so, because you're like Shadows, Visorak, Shadows, Web. These all go together. No. Nope, not even.
That's dumb.
It is. Well, it's like, what was it?
They didn't have the snappiest naming of their
They really didn't. Because even then, like, in 2004, you had City of Legends, and then you like Legends of Metro Nui, and Mystery of Metro Nui, and it's like, okay, guys.
It's almost like they made it for children who wouldn't make a connection.
Oh man, almost.
Yeah.
Almost. They made it for like 11-year-olds.
Little did they know.
Little did they know that, big brain 20-year-olds would now be talking about all this.
Alright, let's be fair, man. You're like 20s.
I'm 20s. I meant 20s in general. I'm not 20.
Sure you did.
Yeah.
Sure you did.
So they're in the Makuta, they get on the storm that breaks up the thing. They land on the beach, and they go, oh man, that was Wenua is like, man, well, that stinks. He's like, oh, what happened? And Nuju is like pulling some seaweed off his face, and he's like, there must have been an error, pilot error. And Matau was like, look, I wasn't the one order given. I was just the one transport driving. Vakama was the one order given. And Vakama was like, all right, everybody. And like, Nakama comes up, and she's like, hey guys, like, you don't need to be harsh. We had a rough trip over, but we made it. We all made it in one piece, so let's go in. And Vakama was like, are you guys just sitting around doing nothing? Come on, we need to get up. We need to go and save the Matoran. And they're all like, Vakama, what the hell, dude? We almost just died in this thing. Like, can't you give us a minute? And he's like, no, I can't give you a minute. We gotta go save the Matoran right now. And so they get up, and they're like, maybe we should send somebody into the city first to kind of scout. He's like, no scouts, no time. The more time we waste, the more time the Matoran are in danger. We go now. So everyone just like is very reluctantly just like, okay. So they start walking through Metro Nui, and they immediately find that it is just a nightmare. Like buildings are just collapsed everywhere. Wild Rocky are on the loose, running around, and there's these webs. These like translucent and almost luminous webs everywhere through the city. And they're like, I wonder what could have made all these. And they're like, probably some kind of Rahi. Meanwhile, Wenua is kind of looking at everything, and as an archivist, he's like, man, these webs and stuff, it seems kind of familiar. But I can't really place my name on it. I don't know. It's probably not a big deal. Spoiler alert, it's a very big deal. So they're walking through, and they initially start going through Le Metru, which is Matal's home, and they all kind of just silently agree that they're in Le Metru. The Toa of Air's home. Whatever he says goes for everything that they're going to do, because they don't want to kind of string, and they know he's really upset. He's like, this can't be Le Metru. He's like, he's just in such disbelief that his home is just destroyed. And as they're walking through, there is this lizard that sees the Toa Metru and immediately starts kind of walking around, but all of a sudden it sees a Visorak spider. And it tries to run, but nope, gets hit with an energy web and gets dragged off, knowing already. I was like, oh man, I'm fucked. My whole life is just doomed. And before the Visorak can come and like bundle it up into a cocoon and eat it, it goes, hey man, listen, I got really important information to tell you in lizard speak. And the Visorak spider's like, it better be really important. He's like, no, it's really important. You guys are really going to hear this. Goes, okay. So the Visorak spider takes this lizard back to its home base, to where
Don't tell me here. Tell it to me. I'm gonna take you home so you can whisper it to me.
Exactly, and brings it to, because the Visorak spiders are drones, and they are, because the Visorak spider kind of weighs it out. He's like, on the one hand, it could be lying, and if that's the case, and I bring him to my superiors, we don't get anything about it, I'm gonna get punished. But the bigger thing is that if it actually does know something important, and I don't find that out, and somebody finds out later that I could have found that out, it's going to be worse. So he weighs it out and he brings it to this throne room that has been made in the Colosseum now, where a robot female lady sits on the throne. Her name is Hordika. And if the Barog were queens, she is a thought. Quick note, she is also the only Bionicle that was, or any one out of the Bionicle toy line, that they gave her little titties. They gave her robot titty plates, and they very much play. Even in the movies, they're like, yeah, no, those are boob plates. So, and then they give her like high heels and shit too. And it's like, you said Legos were sexual.
When did this come out? This is Bionicle.
Yeah, Bayonetta Bionicle. This is 2005, my guy. So, and she's just sitting on the throne, and she's bored, and she's like, man, wonder when those Toa Metru are gonna come around. And the Visorak spider comes up and is like, oh, hey, I got really important information. He's like, oh, it must be really, really, really important information, otherwise you wouldn't be bothering me. He's like, oh, I have this lizard. I'm like, oh, that's not a good start. Just letting you know, it's not a good start. And the lizard's like, hey, just letting you know, Toa Metru are back in Metro Nui. And Hordika's like, oh, that's actually really important information. That's good. Yes.
Who the fuck is a snitch ass lizard, bro?
Yeah, for real, man. Snitch ass, bitch ass lizard. Don't worry, he'll get his, probably. I don't know. And
Spoilers?
Maybe. I mean, you decide.
There's a whole book dedicated
The whole,
to
yeah.
the fuck out of a snitch.
I wouldn't doubt it. I wouldn't doubt if someone out there wrote some whole piece on, like, this is the story of the lizard after it.
Same guy who wrote Sanchu.
Right. So Hordika's like, all right, you can let the lizard go. And the Visorak spider's like, what? What do you mean I can't eat a spider? He's like, and Hordika's like, yeah, we're not savages. We're not savages. It gave us good information, and we reward that loyalty. So let it go. Besides, it'll probably get eaten up later anyway. It's like who cares if it has a few more hours of life? And so let's let it go. Anyway, so the Toa are traveling through Le Metro, and all of a sudden there are Vaki everywhere running around. Here's the thing: when the Great Cataclysm hit, all the Vaki, because they were predominantly just robotic, they can only be charged in like charging stations. And when they were in these charging stations, and all these really crazy lightning strikes were happening, and they started to cause a lot of the station malfunctions, and it caused like a malfunction in like the main prerogative chipsets of the Vaki, and suddenly a lot of them started to think, you know what's the best way to keep order? If everything is dead, no one can break order. If everything is dead, no one can be a lawbreaker. This is the big brain move. So the Vaki are out there, and they're not playing around. And so Vaki quickly kind of get up into the Toa Metru face, and the Toa Metru are fighting them off, but they're like, oh wow, these things are hitting a lot harder because and they're breaking through walls and stuff, because that was the thing, is that the Vaki were programmed not to destroy property and not to injure. Like even their stabs and stuff are designed to disorient or confuse. They're not designed to actually physically injure you. And they're like, wait a second, Vaki can't do that. What are these Vakis? So the Toa Metru end up hiding a little bit, and Onawa is like, hey guys, so here's the deal. Matau, where is the Vaki Moto hub around here where they charge? And he's like, all right, follow me. So he goes in there, and Onawa's digging around. He's like, yep, no, this got really badly damaged during the Cataclysm. It's like, and they're like, well, what does that mean? They're like, here's the thing. They're like, well, Vaki aren't programmed to hit stuff, hurt stuff or whatever. And Onawa goes, yeah, they are. What are you talking about? And they're like, what? No, they aren't. He's like, listen, the Vaki might have been designed by Onumatoran, but Po-Matoran are the ones who built them. And we know what their actual, we built them. We know what they're capable of. And it's like, and I've seen it before where a charging station goes bad and then Vaki just get crazy like this. He's like, they probably are just, like I said, if everything is dead, there can't be anything breaking the law. And they're like, oh, that's great. Maxwell goes, all right, guys, I've got an idea. You guys sneak out of here. I'm going to disguise myself. So Maxwell uses his mask of illusion to turn himself into a Vaki and walks out to the other Vaki because he's like, I'm going to be the best. I'm going to be the best at this. I'm going to buy a lot of time for my friends. And immediately he comes out, they're like, halt, Vaki. They're like, what is your station number? And Matau goes, station number is not important right now. The Toa Metru escaped me. We've got to go find them. And the other Vaki start talking to each other a little bit. And then the leader of the Vaki group goes, oh, a Vaki that let Toa Metru escape? Must be malfunctioning. We should send this one back for disassembly so that we can reprogram it. And Matau's like, oh, fuck. So, as this is happening, the other Toa are trying to escape, and they run into so they're trying to scale a ladder and climb out of there. At one point, another Visorak actually walks around a corner, and Onawa is like, all right, guys, you guys keep going on ahead without me. I'll take care of this thing. And very quickly, he gets ready to fight this Visorak, and Visorak just shoots out an energy web at him and just completely paralyzes him. He's like, fuck. Something jostles the Visorak or something, and it suddenly goes away. I guess whatever the Visorak saw was more important than a Toa. So Onawa is able to get up and meets up back with the other Toa. They end up finding their scaling, and a being of Sonics just shows up in the underground tunnels and starts beaming sonic waves at them. And it's not a good time. And yes.
Were these Sonics blue?
They actually don't know. It didn't really do a whole great job of describing it.
Missed opportunity.
Missed opportunity indeed. But don't worry. Like I said, they made up for it because they made it edgy as hell. So shout out to Edgy, Mr. Edgy. They carried over the edge into the Bionicle year 2005. So they're fighting this thing. Matau manages to escape from the Vaki, and meets back up with them, and they're having a tough time trying to fight this thing because any hit they attack it with, all of a sudden is like deafening noise is being rebounded back at them, and they're like, oh, this is awful. Magneto figures out that it is a being made of sonics and uses his air powers to create a vacuum around it. And because if it's in a vacuum, sound can't travel.
Oh.
So then they're able to just smash it up. And they're like, all right, this is great. Okay. A low rack suddenly zooms on down. A mutated giant low rack, which is like this giant winged serpent, starts coming in, and all of a sudden there's this giant fight between, you've got Baki coming up from below, you've got Visorak coming in from the sides, you've got this giant mutated low rack. Mattel turns himself into a low rack using his massive illusion, and even then the giant mutated low rack is like, something's not right with this thing. So they all start, duking it out, and one thing leads to another. They all manage to escape. We'll leave it at that. But they manage to find a way into the archives and archive access. And they find a way there. And they're like, man, that's crazy. What even was that? And Onwa goes, Wanua goes, I just remembered what those things are out there. He goes, they're Visorak. Oh man, that is a thing I completely missed from before. So back in Maze of Shadows real quick, when they were just exploring Makuto's lair, Onwa opened up a door and this giant face leech jumped on his face like a face hugger and started showing him visions, and all he could be like, oh, Visorak, webs, oh, it's horrible, it's awful. And they're like, what's going on? And they're like, something's, but he didn't seem like he was in pain. It just seemed like there was a voice talking through Onwa, and Vakama was like, and Wanua was like, well, hold on, we should listen. We could learn a lot more if it's got stuff to tell us. And Vakama was like, no, we don't have time. He uses a little fire burst to just kill it, and it falls off Onua's face. He's like, well, what was that? He's like, I don't know, I saw visions of the future or something. He's like, I saw visions, it's horrible, it's Visorak is what it's calling it. That wasn't me talking. He's like, Vakama, is this what you see constantly? Because I feel sorry for you, man. Like, if that's what you see, like, I'm so sorry. And Vakama's like, don't worry, I'm used to it. I'm okay. I'm not okay. And so Wanua is like, oh, those are Visorak. We're jumping back right forward. And they're like, Visorak, they're like, what are you, well, why didn't you tell? Vakama's like, what kind of archivist are you? How did you not know it was Visorak? Why didn't you tell us before him? And everyone's like, whoa, Vakama, stop jumping down his throat. He's like, look, the Visorak are really, we don't really know much about them. The only thing I ever saw about them when I was in the archives was I saw a stone tablet that had information about the Visorak on them. They called them, bringers of death. And that there are some invasive species that, goes and, they have giant swarms, and they're said that they can take over entire lands with their numbers. And it's at this moment that they all start to kind of put a few things together, because they go, hey, Wanua, how many Rahi are actually native to Metru Nui? And he goes, not a lot. And he goes, that means that over all the years, all the Rahi that were just showing up and coming into Metru Nui, and even the ones we saw coming down from Matanui to Metru Nui, that means that they were running from something else. And that something is probably the Visorak. And they're like, and even then, Vakama's like, who cares? There are a few spiders. We don't have time to sit around. I was like, we need to go save the Matoran. And they're like, okay, Vakama. And so that pretty much ends. One other thing quickly there. They discover in the archives a wounded ash bear who is fatally injured and is just dying. And Nokama tries talking to it, and she's like, guys, it's dying. And they're like, and Nokama's like, that's really nice. We've got to go save the Matoran. We don't have time for this. And Nokama's like, no, she kind of jumps back at Vakama, and he's like, look, I get that you're having a rough time here. Think about Matau. We've only seen his part of the city has been destroyed. We're all working to save the Matoran. We're all working to save everything. As Toa, we should be working to save every living thing we can. I'm not going to go until we figure out how to save this. And they're like, Nokama. And even Nuji's like, Nokama was like, I empathize with you on this, but there's not a whole lot to do. And Matau just says very absentmindedly, it's like, Toa power. And they're like, what? And they're like, I don't know. I just thought maybe like we could put Toa power into the bear. Maybe that would make it better or something. And Okama's like, yeah, actually, like, why don't we try using our powers to heal something instead of destroy them? And they all kind of like, I mean, I'm willing to try it. And Okama's like, okay, we try it. Because they're also like, we don't know what will happen to us. We've already put energy into Toa stones. We don't know what this... And Okama's like, all right, we'll help the stupid bear. And if it doesn't work, we leave. Deal? And Okama's like, I can agree to that. And so they all come together and they pool their energy together and an even distribution and put some of their Toa power into the bear, and it is completely healed. And gets up, gives its thanks, and runs off. And they're like, and they were all, this was kind of like a very like mystical experience for all of them. They're like, wow, that was really actually kind of cool. And that's pretty much the end. So as they are walking out, they're like, all right, let's head to the Coliseum, guys. And they're like, hey, Bakama, maybe we should look and see if there's any traps. If something's out here, maybe it would not want us to get to... And he's like, no, nonsense. I haven't seen any other traps or anything. Just Baki and Rahi. Nothing we can't deal with. Come on, guys, let's go. And they immediately walk into a giant trap because all of a sudden Bakama gets hit with an energy web and drops to the ground. And all the other Toa get hit with energy webs and they drop to the ground. And like, oh man, great job, Bakama. Way to go, fearless leader. And he's like, shut up. It is at this point that King Sidorak, the leader of the Visorak hordes, is sitting, and he has gotten news that the Visorak have caught the Toa Metru. One thing also before it was they inspected some of the cocoons while they were climbing that ladder that the Visorak had built, and they noticed that there were a lot of barbs in the cocoon, and they're like, that is really weird. And they're like, I wonder what made these things, and they were also like, I wonder what came out of them. And King Sidorak is like, oh, that's good. We've captured the Toa. Rakuta will be pleased with this. Let's go ahead and kill them then. And Hordika comes up. And she goes, King Sidorak, surely such an easy death is not worthy of your greatness. We should make a grander spectacle of it. Something more worthy of your name, King Sidorak, that people will remember for ages. And King Sidorak is like, Hordika, my viceroy, and hopefully to be something a lot more soon. King Sidorak will also be known as King Simperak, because all he does his entire time is be like, please, Hordika, I like Hordika so much. She could be my viceroy. Oh, she could be my queen. So we got King Sidorak or Simperak and Ruthada, so they devised a thing where instead of just killing them, they have all the Toa Metru put up into these giant cocoons in the skyline outside of the Colosseum. And as they're sitting there waiting for their inevitable, because they're like looking at like the strands that are holding them up, and they're like, any minute now these are gonna just fall out, and we're all just gonna fall to our deaths. And they're like, well guys, have anything left to say? And Bakama's like, all I can say is I did my best to lead you guys on this. I don't have any regrets. And immediately the cocoons start like shooting like energy through them because the barbs are like jabbing them. And all of a sudden like Bakama's like arm just like juts out of the side of the cocoon, but it's horribly mutated. It's got like this fire sword hand just like grafted to it. And even then, other of the Toa Metru, they're horribly mutating at this point. They're all breaking out of the cocoons, and suddenly the cocoons start falling out of the sky, and they're going straight down to their inevitable deaths. And suddenly they're whisked away. Something has caught them. And they look up, and there are these like hunched over beings that have the faces of Rakshi, but have little propellers on the backs, and they are just zooming them away, and they're like, whoa, what are you? And they're like, oh man, we got a lot to talk about, guys. So this will bring us to the end of Book 7, Web of the Visorak. And will lead us into Book 8, Challenge of the Hordika. I was going to say, let's go ahead and take a quick break here. and then we'll get back to it. Okay, and we are going. All right, so back from break brings us to book 8, Challenge of the Hordika. A quick note before this is at the beginning of book 7, Turaga Vakama was getting ready to tell more tales, but Turaga Nuju stopped Vakama, and they had like a meeting on the side. And Nuju was just, doing his clicks and whistles thing, because that's what he does.
Oh, he started doing that now?
No, this is when the Turaga.
Oh.
Because this is a little bit before. And Turaga Vakama is like, look, they deserve to know everything.
It's time for knowing.
The time for knowing is now.
Yeah!
I know. They deserve to know everything. And Turaga Nuju, that is also another point, is that the other Turaga don't actually need Matoro as an interpreter. They all can understand what Turaga Nuju says, even through his clicks and whistles. And Turaga Nuju speaks a word in Matoran Common Tongue for probably the first time in like hundreds of years, and says, Hordika. And Turaga Vakama is like, yes, even the Hordika, they need to know that. And Turaga Nuju just storms off. And Turaga Vakama is like, I don't even know if I just lost a friend here. And tells Toatahu Nuva that the only person who will hear the next story is going to be him. And it will be up to Toatahu Nuva to decide whether the other Toa should also hear the rest of the tale afterward. And that's where he begins in book 7 and tells that story. And at the end of book 7, Toatahu, Turaga Vakama is like, well, Tahu, what do you think? And Tahu Nuva was like, Turaga Vakama, I don't know what you're worried about. You guys were successful. You ended up saving the Matoran end. This is just the beginning of a great victory for you guys. I think all the other Toa should hear. It signals this giant fire blast into the sky as a signal for the other Toa to come. And Turaga Vakama was like, you think this was a victory for us? Oh, I haven't seen anything. What was I gonna say? So we get to Challenge of the Hordika, and we're really introduced to these little creatures that carried the mutated Toa Metru off. Also, Hordika has found out that the Toa didn't die, and she's like, Rahaga, I hate them. I hate them so much, but this could be a blessing in disguise. Because I need the Toa Metru, actually. I was just going to harvest their bodies for elemental energy, but a better idea. Because she is actually on the precipice near the sea gates where Makuta is imprisoned still in a giant block of solid protodermis. And she takes a claw and just digs into it and carves out a slice of the prison and puts it into her breastplate over where her heart light is. Because she's like, Makuta. She's like, you're so powerful and strong and great. Even though you're imprisoned right here, you sent out telepathically to us, your loyal servants, to come and rescue you. And we are here. And soon these Toa will be gone and all will know your glory. And then she goes back to doing whatever Bionicle thought things do. Yes.
Tristan.
Did he actually send out a telepathic message?
Yes.
Or she's a crazy thought?
No,
Okay.
he actually, while Makuta is imprisoned in this block of protodermis and can't actually move or do anything, he was actually able to send out telepathic projections to summon Sidorak, Hordika, and the Visorak hordes.
I just didn't know if that whap went to her brain,
No, you might think that she was, but no. Hordika is as cunning as she is, because she's designed as like this very like femme fatale kind of character.
This is the banana one.
Yes, this is the banana.
The one with the boobies.
Yes, the one with the boobies.
The canonical
Yeah.
boobies.
The canonical boobies. So Hordika is of the Vortex species, which are a reptilian race. Their entire race is like a matriarchy. Pretty much, if you're born female, you basically get everything.
Hey.
If you're born male, your job is to just die and be the footstools for the women's. And nothing is seen better in this than one of the trials in coming of age training that Vortex go through, which is the trial of the mountain, and where because of some reasons they have a mountain that is just alive and it's terribly treacherous and horrible. And generally, Vortex pair up in teams of 2 at a certain age, male and female, and they're going to have to climb this mountain together. The goal being for them to be strong enough to climb over this living mountain of death. And like 98,
He always dies.
98% of the time, like even Hordika, like her partner, he was like, oh, I'll help me, Hordika, and she's like, nah, simp, and just leaves him to die and ascends, and she's gonna become glory. Hordika and Visorak are also part of an organization that is called the Brotherhood of Makuta, of one of Makuta's many, many vassals. It was, what is it? So that's why they're in the city. Makuta telepathically called out to them and to try and say, but only Hordika really knows what's going on. Visorak is just dumb. Visorak is so just up his own ass with his own ego and just focused on his position. He cannot see Hordika scheming in the background or even begin to try and comprehend what Makuta's plans actually are. So we get to the Rahaga, these little creatures here that look like, they have the Rakshi faces, they have bodies that look like Turaga, they're defined as such, and they're these weird creatures, and immediately all the Toa Metru are not doing well. They're not doing okay with the fact that they're all horribly mutated now, and especially Matau, who is like, when did I become so ugly? They're horribly...
Are there toys of them?
Yes, there sure are. Yes, there sure are. So, for example, this is Toa Metru Vakama here with his regular Toa Metru design, and this is like the Toa Hordika Vakama, where it's just very, very different. Same thing over here for Anua, where they have different little weapons. And one thing also is they decided to make only one of the arms be able to move up and down. The other is just kind of whatever.
Well, isn't it so that it looks different and it's all mutated and fucked up?
I guess that's a really good reason for it. But the other big thing they added was this year's collectibles, which are these little spinners, these Rotuka spinners that you strap on the back and they just fucking go.
Fly off the fucking handle.
Yeah, they go. Yes, Tristan.
Can I too collect them?
You too can collect them. However, this is the first year where I guess the Bionicle people at LEGO were like, hey, so we actually really don't have a good way to make them really collectible. So you could just buy extra packs that would just have extra various colored ones. They didn't really do anything, but they would have...
Was there also Energized Protodermis in the sacks that they were in? Or why are they silver?
That's just weird silvery pieces for whatever reason. That's just how they were mutated into. With Hordika venom is what it was. The Visorak uses Hordika venom to mutate them. But yeah, so the only thing with the actual Rotuka spinners is there's like a code written around the side of every one in the Matoran language that you can go online and redeem for whatever points to enter whatever sweepstakes.
You have to like translate it?
Yeah, you have to go on there. You didn't have to translate it, you just had to you did have to translate it. Because
You said it was easy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty easy. Like, it's like, so really easy ones. If it's a full circle, little circle on the bottom, I didn't bring any other markers in here, it'll be like an A. So you can look at it as an A and there's like a hole in the bottom of the A. Or if it's circle up here, circle down here, and then a big circle around, that's a B. And then if it's like a circle on the side here, big circle around, it makes a C. So it's very easy to just kind of like geometrically. No, that's a Sharpie.
Degeneracy. Just trying to help.
So it was really easy to figure out there. So Rotuka spinners are a thing that the Rahaga have, that the Visorak have, that the Toa Hordika have, and like Hordika and Visorak have, because this is where they introduced the idea of Rotuka is just a physically manifested version of your own energy, and every living being can create a Rotuka spinner with the caveat that they have to have some way, either naturally or through some other tool, to be able to project it. Which is why you don't see Toa just going around projecting Rotuka spinners everywhere. But the Visorak have Hordika spinners that do a whole bunch of different stuff. The red ones can hit you with them, and they send a very searing hot pain through your body that makes you unable to focus on anything. The blue ones will make it so that if you get hit by it, you inflate, and then just the idea is that they're water hunters, so you would inflate and then just be brought up back to the water surface.
Okay.
The green ones have an acid one because the green ones always have acid ones. They can rip through everything.
I'm sorry. No,
Yes.
I'm stuck on the blue one. How do they inflate? Because they're mostly made of.
I don't
that
know.
entail?
I don't know. I don't know if it's a weird. I don't know. It just says that they inflate.
It's magic.
They just whoop up, and then I guess later they can. I don't know, man.
These things
I
are
don't know,
supposed
man.
to be. They
don't
look.
think about it too hard.
Yeah. Because they look
it-
entirely mechanical, but they're supposed to be.
They're supposed to have some
biological
organic to them, but I
component.
guess like they're. It's weird. The brown ones I think can like paralyze you or something. The white ones do something I can't remember. It's not really important. But the black ones, they can shoot you in like this with a. It's like the absence of light. You get trapped in like a zone of darkness.
This is a black hole.
Kind of, sort of, where nothing can really see you and you can't see your way out. It is more or less you get transported into a dimensional gate into the realm of shadows or something. And there's some other bigger variants, but that's probably there. So the Rahaga have them too. Now this is an important point to note is that in the movie Web of Shadows, when the Rahaga are saving the Toa Hordika, they have like helicopter blades on their back, and that's how they're flying, because that's where usually the Rotuka spinners go. You spin them. This is not canon. They don't actually have those. It's just in the books that are described as just jumping. They jump good, just like Samurai Jack. Can't fly, just jump good. But all their Rotuka spinners do different things too. And all of their stabs do different things, like the red one can hypnotize, specifically really good at like reptile type Rocky. Some of them like Klaus, the white one, can use his as a flute, like the white power or like the green Power Ranger, and he can summon ice bats. And they all do different things there, and and for the most part, all of their Rotuka spinners are like snares that are designed to capture things. Because what the Rahaga have been doing this entire time is they've been living around Metro Nui and traveling from island to island and island, following in the wake and ahead of the Visorak hordes. And basically, all they're doing is rescuing Rahi from the Visorak, so they'll snare them and capture them and then let them go, so the Visorak don't get them. So they're very pro, not the Visorak and just regular Rahi. And they tell the Hordika, the Toa Hordika, they're like, okay, look, so here's the thing. We are the Rahaga. We have saved you. You guys are Hordika. You've been injected with Hordika venom. You become horribly mutated. And they're like, whoa, man, well, how long will we be like this? And they're like, possibly forever. But that's up to you to decide, because there's a way that we can reverse this. And they go, really? Well, how do we do that? And it's like, we have to find a creature named Kitongu. And Matau goes, what's the Kitanongu? And they're like, no, it's the Kitongu, not Kitanongu. Like, yeah, that. What's that? Well, Kitongu is a Rahi that has the ability to have a Rotuka spinner that can counteract any poison or venom in anything. And at this point, so all of the Rahaga are, the red one is Norek, the green one is Irene, the white one is Qualis, the blue one is Gaki, the black one is Bomonga, and the brown one is Pokes. And they all are kind of a little weird. But Irene just kind of scoffs and laughs at this, and he's like, man, yeah, have fun chasing some mythical creature. And they're like, well, what does he mean by that? And Norek is like, some among us don't believe that Kitongu actually exists. And like, so we don't actually know if this thing exists. He's like, no, but I believe he does. If we can find him, that'll help us or whatever. And they're like, okay, well, and they're like, well, here's the issue, is that you've been injected with Hordika venom. Hordika venom is a horrible thing that will slowly mutate you you are part Rahi now. And even now you'll probably feel like you're having like bestial urges. You're having like these, like, you're getting more like, you're able to...
Do you want to mate?
Okay, we'll get in there. You're getting more like easy to fall into different, more anger and different emotions here. And even Matau was like, in the movie, in the novelization, Matt Howard talks about like, hey, Okama, I want to go. I've got this sudden need for nest making. You wanna? Which once again, the movies are the canon and everything, except Greg Farshchi didn't write that, and the book Web of Shadows is a novelization of the movie, which Greg Farshchi will go back to say as well. I didn't have anything to do with that, and that was a movie only thing, but it technically that's weird. So like, well, what do we do? Like, well, we need to find, the. And Vakama is like, no, we need to find the Matoran. We need to go to the Coliseum right now and find the Matoran.
The Matoran gang.
Matoran gang. And Norik is like, well, how well did that work for you last time, bud? And he's like, boy, you cheeky little shit, what you say? And he's like, oh, I'm just saying, you're going to go and save the Matoran with what? Your horribly deformed body? And you can't even use your elemental powers? Like, how's that going to go for you? And Vakama just kind of pouts a little bit. And they're like, well, what do we do? He's like, well, first of all, you guys need to chill. The Matoran are fine and safe in the Coliseum. That's where the Visorak have set up camp, so nothing's going to destroy that place or get in or get out that's bad. So right now, you can kind of rest a little easy on that. You need to kind of come to peace, because you'll be fighting with like this rocky side of you, and if you lose to it, you will just become permanently mutated.
There are 2 wolves inside of
Yeah, there are 2 wolves inside of you.
One is Rahi, the other is also Rahi.
Yeah, one of you drinks on weekends and one of you drinks on weekdays. They go, okay, well, let's start looking for ways to. So all the Raga team up with the Toa Hordika, and they all start going around and checking out the environment, because the Hordika are just kind of showing them around at what different things. And we kind of get to see them all interacting with different Rahi. And we see the Toa Hordika have become a lot more, they're a lot more frustrated. Even like, so Qualis and Nuju are in a crystalline knowledge tower, searching for anything that might have anything to do with Kitangu. And they're like, Kitangu, and Qualis is just kind of looking around, and he's like, oh man, it's like, oh, these Rahi stuff or whatever. And he's like, oh, Gecko. And he's reading through books, he's like, Gecko birds? Why are they called that? And Nuju is just really irritated. He's like, because that's what they've always been called. Like, for Komatoran, like, he is being extraordinarily expressive. He's like, I don't know, maybe that's because they've always been called that. And Qualis is like, that's not what they call themselves. And he's like, what do you mean that's not what the Gecko birds call themselves? He's like, in fact, Gecko was probably an insult in their language, if I had to guess. He's like, by the way, I really like flying Rahi, and I speak the language of flying Rahi and birds. Check this shit out. And he just was able to, like, chitter and, like, summon some ice bats, and Nuju's like, what the hell is going on?
So this is the origin of the...
This is the origin of where Nuju will learn to speak the language of flying Rahi and stuff.
I'm still confused why, like, the creators... Because it seems like it's always the Toa and Matoran and stuff that are, like, really integrated with the Rahi.
Yes.
It seems like it would make more sense for Matau.
You would think so, but the Matoran already have their own stupid language, so they're like, we can't double down and give the Turaga 2 stupid languages.
Right.
So I don't know. Like one would think, and so and then you have Tohordika, Winua, and Balunga are digging through the archives, and they find a tablet and more stuff. And then they get hit by one of the Visorak's Rituka spinners that have like the shadow phase thing, and they get stuck in a shadow realm. And it's not good. At the same time, Kraka from the Darkness Below, I think it was? Darkness Below, the being that could shapeshift into anything, shows back up, and she decides she is going to challenge Hordika, and bursts on in, and is like, hey bitch, you're on my throne. And Hordika is like, oh, Kraka, what's up, dog? That's cute that you thought you could come fight me. Like, have at it. And so they immediately start getting to it, and Kraka's just transforming into different Toa and stuff, and trying to shapeshift and fight. And Hordika is just like dodging everything. She's like, you can't even hit me. You can't even hit me. What are you doing? You can't even hit me.
So they fall into a mud.
Ah, yeah. So they start smacking each other around a bit, and eventually it starts getting to where, and there's like a horde of Visorak just kind of like making a circle around them. Like, anytime they can come and attack. But Hordika's like, no, this is one-on-one. She came to challenge me alone? Alright, I respect
They're
it.
waiting
I
on the skinny
respect it.
plates to come off.
Yeah, what's going on?
Are we sure this wasn't a stunt for Hordika's OnlyFans?
Man, only Matorans, man.
Watch my top panels come off.
Open plates. And Hordika defeats Kraka pretty handily with a dagger up her. She's like, "Alright, get up, bitch. You work for me now." And Kraka's like, "I'm not working for shit." She's like, "Listen, Visorak hordes can literally take over anything whenever. It doesn't matter where you are. They'll find you and they'll kill you. Or, you work for us. I give you a little place of your own. It's all fine." Kraka weighs the options and goes, "Okay, sure thing. I'll work for you." With the intent in mind that after she is done helping Hordika, that she will inevitably betray Hordika and take Metro Nui for her own.
I wonder how that's gonna go.
I wonder. So, at this time, Vakama and Norik are... Vakama's not doing good. Vakama's really not doing good. He's having a real bad time. He's just so angry. And whatever. So he is at his old forge with Norik, and he is just destroying stuff. He's like, I hate everything. It's like, I can't... And it's like, Vakama is like, listen, it's not that bad, man. Like, nothing's irreversible yet. And he's like, oh, no, I'm done being the leader. You know, look at what me being the leader's gotten us into. Nothing good has come of this. I'm sick of it. Nobody else understands me. And he's like, oh, chill, man. And he finds, and not just like some other stuff, opens a panel, and Vakama finds a disc. Now, when all the Toa Metru became Toa Metru, at their, in the Toa Suva, they found discs emblemized with their masks on them, with their names. And this was like a heraldic, you know, like this was as destined to be. You are destined to become a Toa, as prophesied. And he opens a drawer and he finds a Toa disc that has Nuri's face on it. The Fire Matoran, who was his original masked mentor from before in the Matoran. And that's his Toa disc. And Vakama gets really confused, and he's like, wait, this is a Toa disc for Nuri. But that doesn't make any sense. And he pulls out his disc, and he realizes that a name has been scratched out on it, and his name has been put over it. And even the mask has been altered to have his mask on it. He wipes away, and he realizes it is also Nuri. And this crushes Vakama, because he looks at it and goes, we weren't destined to become Toa. We were a mistake. And so, at the same time, in the deserts, canyons of Pometru, Anawa and Pokes are kind of digging around in a cave, and they're, luring some rock raptors out of the way to fight some Visorak and kicking all of up to make their way over. And as they're there, all of a sudden this rock slide happens, and one thing leads to another. Kraka shows up and acts like she's going to fight them, but Anawa kind of like hands her ass a little bit, and right before this, he looks over into where this wall had fallen out, and he looks in and he's like, oh man, this is another of Makuta's lairs. And he starts looking around and he sees things, and he finds what can only be described as Makuta's notes and diaries. And in it, he reads that he's read the stars, and that there are 6 Matoran who are destined to become Toa. And they are Nuri, Visola, Akmau, Orcam, Irie, and Tahuti. And that just won't do. So, yes.
Was Akmal the fucky one?
Yes, Akmau is the fucking one who was already traitorous before. He's a little asshole guy. He sold #1 best comet Poison Ball.
So we've got him, and then the other Red Matoran who was just jealous.
Yeah, who was jealous because Vakama's a better mask maker. Orcam, who always played things way too safe, while Matau was more ready to be willing and daredevil.
It's one of the ones, and then one of the ones the obsessed one.
Yeah. The Visola is the one who's super obsessed with Nakama. And
Oh my god.
All of them, they were supposed to be the.
That sounds like the worst timeline.
It's literally the B team.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is because Anawa is thinking about it, and he's like, well, maybe that would have been the thing, is because none of them are particularly like really big in their personalities, but they can be brought together under a good teacher like Toa Lakan, and they could learn and become a good functioning Toa team, as opposed to their team, which had really, really strong and diverse and divisive personalities, and they always had trouble working together, and they're like, that must be it. We weren't destined for this. We're going against destiny. That's why everything is so wrong. Because Makuda's like, so I have implanted, so he's like, I think these are we don't work with. Meanwhile, in God Metru, Hordika Nokama and Gaki make their way to the Great Temple, and Nokama's like, I don't feel good and right about going to the Great Temple as defiled and horrible as I am like this. I'm not Toa. And Gaki's like, nigga, seriously? I mean, look, that's all you if you don't want to go in, but we gotta go look, so I'm gonna go. I'm looking. And then Nokama eventually kind of comes on in too, and they find a compartment where it had been where some of the Gamatoran scribes had read the stars and seen the prophecies and figured out who the Toa were going to be. And she looks at it, and all of the right before this, Kraka had shown up, and because Kraka is basically just planting this material there everywhere for the Toa to find, as per Hordika. And over where all these this compartment where all these great Kanohi masks are that are meant for whatever the next Toa Metru team are, there's a bunch of names. And the names have been kind of like, so the Gamatoran were like, no, it's better if nobody knows Destiny. And it just happens. So we'll go ahead and just write, we'll put some protodermis over the names so they can't be read. And she clears off the protodermis, and Nokama's like, oh, what was that noise? Walks in there and finds that on all of the, by all the masks are the names of Nuri, Visola, Irie, Akmal, all the Matoran. She's like, we're a mistake. We weren't destined to be Toa. And at the same time, and then we cut back to Metru and what is it? Metau and Iruni really aren't doing anything in particular. They're not really doing anything important, except Iruni mentions to because Metau's like, oh man, we're gonna be stuck like this forever. No more Toa heroing for me. And Iruni's like, look, even if we don't find Kitangu, if you're a Toa hero, you're always a Toa hero. He's like, even us, we were Toa, and even now we're still hero. And he's like, you what, mate? He's like, oh yeah, that's a story for another time. Norik is the one who tells us.
The time for knowing.
Yeah, the time for knowing. Norik is the better storyteller between us. But yeah, we were once Toa. But look at us now. We're not doing too bad. And like Matchow's like, no, we're just doing the worst. And so Vakama is so infuriated by this notion that he's found Nuri's disc that he's like, no. He's like, we were wrong. He's like, I'm gonna go break into Toa Lacan's house. I need to find out what the truth. And Norik is like, whoa, dude. He's a dead guy. We can't just go busting into his house. He's like, have some respect. He's like, fuck respect. Fuck that dead guy. I'm going to break into a house. I'm going to read his diary. He reads his diary and he sees that Lacan had been reading the stars and seen, yes.
Like an actual diary?
Yes.
This guy actually kept a diary.
Yes.
Okay.
They just chisel out diaries. And he was talking about, he's like, that in Toa Lacan's diary, he writes that he believed that something is wrong with Turaga Duma. And the disappearance of all the Toa beforehand just seemed really odd, and he believes he's seen Nadiki and some other Dark Hunter in Metru Nui, and that things are in danger, and that to preserve the future, a new Toa team must be created. And while he read the stars and found the names of 6 Matoran, Nuri, Irie, all of them, that a thought suddenly popped into his mind that he knew 6 Matoran who were better for the job. And that it was going to be Vakama, Nokama, Matau, Nuju, Onua, and Wenua. And that those would be the Matoran he gave the stones to. And so Norik is like, see, look, Toa Lacan was right. He picked the right guys. And Vakama's like, no, Lacan made a mistake. He went against destiny. He just on a whim. He went against destiny and chose us. And that's and so even then. Is at this point, so going back over to Pometru, this is where Onua is reading through Makuda's diary and finds that Makuda is actually the one who implanted the idea telepathically into Toa Lacan to choose them. Because Makuda believed that, these are 6 Toa who are these are 6 Matoran who are so vast in their personalities and so widely different that there's no way they could come together and make a cohesive team. And that if they made him there, then Metru Nui would just be his for the taking.
So Destiny did decide that the Snake Oil Salesman should be a Toa.
Yes.
That's bullshit.
I agree. Destiny did decide that, little shit-ass rock man selling poison rock balls, who was a traitor from the beginning, who was a traitor later on,
And the psychopathic
and
shrine
and
girl.
psychopath, and jealous mask maker.
The
and
girl from Hey Arnold.
Yeah, the girl, Helga Pataki. Yeah. Those were the ones who were destined to be Toa. Because presumably the Turaga Lacan would be like, hey, stop being crazy, you guys. It's like, you crazy kids. And then they would just stop. And so Anno was like, the other Toa are not going to like this. And then Kraka shows up, and Anno was like, man, it sure was convenient that I found this lair here, Kraka. I know it's you, bitch. I know it's you. Because Anno doesn't take much shit from anyone. And she shows up, and they tussle a little bit, and Anno is like, okay, look, here's the deal. What's going on? And she's like, okay, look. I sided with Hordika on this temporarily because she kicked my ass, but I want her gone too. And Anno was like, all right, he's like, why don't you help us and get rid of her? Because the biggest threat is them. Once we get rid of Visorak and everything, we can do whatever there. And she's like, okay, fine, I will help you guys. And so this leads to one of the most as they go on, Matao and Irene are in a tower looking, and all of a sudden they see a bunch of Visorak climbing this tower. And they're like, oh man, hey, Matao, you need to go and search every exit on this tower and make sure it's boarded shut so the Visorak can't get in. If any one of them gets in, we're gonna be doomed. And Matao's like, okay, cool. So he starts running up the stairs, and the Visorak corner, he's wind blasting out, because they're starting to get some of their elemental power back, and the Ratuka spinnering their elemental energies out. And he manages to close it up, and then he hears at the bottom of the stair, it's No Kama's voice. She's like, oh no, Matao, we're stuck out here. Help us in. And Irune is like, don't listen to her. It's a trap. If you open that door, we're dead. And Matao is like, oh, but it sounds just like No Kama. It's like, I can't leave her out there. And she's like, oh no, the Visorak are coming, Matao. Oh no, we're dying out here. Like, she's like horrible wails. And Matao is like, nope, I can't risk it. And he opens the door, and it's a big old Visorak mimicking No Kama's voice, saying, thank you, Matao. I knew I could count on you. And now the Visorak are coming in this trap tower, and like, oh no! At the same time, Vakama and Norik see that there's Visorak heading towards this one giant tower. They start heading that way. Nokama and Gaki start heading that way. Nuju and Qualis are being attacked by Visorak while they're looking for stuff on Kitongu. And Qualis uses his little flute to summon ice bats to confuse the Visorak and hold them off and just whatever while they make their escape. And they see Onua and Kraka, and they're like, oh man, they meet up and they're like, okay, what are we going to do? We need to get to that tower. There's going to be a big thing over there. It's like, we need something that's going to be big enough to, destroy something out there. And it's like, hold on, wait a minute. Remember that Tatarak dragon thing that was coming around out of the ground? It's like, where is the answer? It's like, that was a big thing. It's like, it's probably still down in the archives. He's like, well, let's go get it and ride it out to battle. So they go down, they find the Tatarak, and they basically go, hey. And it's like, what is the answer? And they're like, hey, those spider dudes in that tower, they know the answer, and they won't tell you. And he's like, and so
The time for knowing is now!
So they jump on the back of the Tatarak, and it's just this 40-foot dragon just goes destroying through Metru Nui. And Kraka disguises herself also as Onua, so now there's two of them. So then, and Qualis is like, wow, a real Tatarak. How'd you guys get this thing in here? He's like, they're really crazy on the island they come from. They used to flourish, but I ain't never seen one like this. And they're like, that's what you're paying attention to? So all the Toa are slowly making their way. Also, at the same time, King Sidorak is up at nearby this tower. He's building this giant web tower there. He's like, it seems my Visorak hordes have found some Toa in the tower. And that's good, because all the other Toa seem to be coming towards it like a beacon. This is good. I'll be able to crush them all in one blow. Visorak, summon the Zybon. And all the Visorak are like, you what? And they're like, I don't know about this. And so I think they're Unarak is what it is. Or maybe it's one of them. I don't know, the Kagarak or whatever. They can open up a dimensional portal to the Shadow Realm thing that Bamonga and Wanua have been running around in this entire time. Because they've basically been holding hands and going, if you let go of me, we'll never find each other. And all of a sudden, a white portal opens up. And they're like, all right, that's where we go. We follow behind these Visorak that are walking through here. And then, as they're walking out, the Zybon comes out. The Zybon is this giant, hulking, towering spider demon, which you could make. You just had to combine all of the different Visorak together and get this giant spider demon thing that just casually eats other smaller Visorak. It's like, Zybon, destroy the tower and the Toa, and it decides to start moving towards it. Meanwhile, Matau is looking out the window with Iruni, and he sees on the horizon Bakama and Nor coming up, and then all the other Toa, and on the horizon a Tatarak with two Anuas riding on the back of it, and Nuju, and and he's like, I must be having a fever dream, because there is no way this is what's happening right now. The Tatarak immediately gets up and goes, hey, Tatarak, see that guy right there, that giant spider dude? He knows the answer and he won't tell you. And he's like, I need to know! Turns into Phil Collins, like, I want to know! Can you show me? And so he's gonna go, goes and starts to try and fight. And they're, dealing blows back to the other. The other Toa bust in and they go out the tower. They get, Matau and Iruni out, and they're having a good time fighting and destroying the hordes, and they break down the tower, and Sidorak is like, oh, this is a lost cause. I will be back, Toa, and ditches. Unfortunately, he was like, Zybon, keep doing stuff. And so they open up another gate back to the Silent Shadow Realm or whatever thing, and Kraka is on the back of the Tatarak, and it's getting kind of a little kicked in by the Zybon, and Kraka's like, oh hell no, and just jumps on its back and runs up and starts trying to fight the Zybon on the back of it and pushes it, but they all three, the Zybon, the Kraka, and the Tatarak, all get pushed into this zone of darkness and sealed off. And Ono is actually, surprisingly, he's kind of upset about this because Kraka had actually kind of proved herself to be an ally. And even talks about it later is that, while we here are Toa kind of experiencing what it's like to be Rahi, I think that was a Rahi who got to experience what it was like to be a Toa for a little bit. And everyone has this very kind of somber moment about it. And then they go, okay, well, what do we do with this giant? It's like, well, we locked this tower up, and there's a bunch of Visorak inside, and they're like, don't open it up. Just let them sit there. It's a self-correcting problem, trust me. They're like, just let it go for a day or so, and there won't be much to clean up in there. So after a day or so, they open up this tower back up, and 10 Visorak out of 1,000 come out because they just destroyed each other. And they're like, all right, well, now we clean this place up. What are we going to do with it? And they're like, he's like, well, you guys don't, the Rahaga are like, well, you guys don't have a home base or anything, so let's set all this encampment up as a home base. And it becomes the Tower of Toa, and they set up elemental barriers and stuff, and so it becomes their home base for a little bit. And this is the end of Challenge of the Hordika, Book 8. In the side, yes.
Before you go on to the next book, I just want to ask real quick, this is kind of like a bigger picture question.
Yes.
So, how are the sales on Bionicle doing? It's 2005.
2005? Still doing really good.
Okay, because some of this edge kind of feels like a desperate grab to hold on to an aging fan base.
So it wasn't Edge at the time because 2005 and 2006 were the general period where Edge was just added to everything and alt rock kind of put into it. This is all at the same time. So they had I think it was All Insane Kids was the band. They did 2 songs to kind of tie in with Bionicle for this year. And I mean, once again, this is the same year that Puddle of Filth, Linkin Park, Trapped, all those bands were really.
When you start putting titties on Bionicles, I feel like there's in a boardroom being like, all right, how do we keep these fucking 13-year-olds?
I mean, listen, Newgrounds was a big thing at this time too. So I mean,
that doesn't make it right.
Yeah, doesn't make it right. But I mean, that just was the current age of media at the time. Okay. Everything's kind of getting dark and edgy, and
Shadow's got handguns.
He's got guns, and an AK.
Bionicles are always 100 in my book.
There we go. So So yeah, so no, it wasn't like sales were declining really hard and they were trying to make a grab for it. It's just this is kind of the trend that a lot of things were going to. Oh, even things like Teen Titans on TV. It was a really popular cartoon. It had a very dark edge to it compared to like Teen Titans Go now, which is like
We don't talk about that.
we don't.
That's not fun.
Yeah. So once again, it's more like this is just it is a relic of its time period.
I was
I guess.
curious if we're in like this downward spiral.
No. We don't get that way
Downward
until
spiral.
much later. In the comics and in a new online web series thing, because Kepler Studios did some new Flash web series stuff for Metro Nui, and they just made a lot of like Baki animations, but not really much else. A new studio has taken up where they're going to do some things where after they do all this, Bakama decides that, hey, let's go try and challenge the Coliseum now, guys. We're doing really good. So they sneak under a Visorak battle ram and have like two of them go in there under Vakama's orders. Hordika sees this and is like, hey, send the battle ram to the furnace. LOL, it'd be cool. And it completely backfires. The whole plan is awful. Wenua is like, hey, Vakama, that was terrible of an idea. You sent all them too. You basically were sending people to their death. And Vakama attacks Wenua. And I mean, once again, tensions are continuously rising. People are getting fed up with Vakama. Vakama's lashing out at everybody. And the Rahaga are just doing their best to try and keep the peace because the Rahaga, for the most part, are really able to kind of work with the other Toa Hordika. But Vakama is just really, he's just not sticking with the program. He's not sticking with the program, and he's kind of getting this mentality of, if nobody else is willing to go and help me save the Matoran, I'll do it myself.
Matoran gang.
Matoran gang. So, in the comics and stuff after this, I think Norik and Gaki tell Vakama about this mask of light that they have hidden in the city of Metro Nui. And that to get the mask of light, because the forces of Makuta get this mask of light, it's gonna be a bad time. But to get it, they've hidden these Makoki stones around the city. These are the same Makoki stones from way back in year 1 that the Toa Mata had to get to open up the Mangai lair, where they could go down into Makuta, where it's like the rocks in a circle shape, and they're all different pieces. We're like, well, we use, because Makoki in the Matoran language just means key, so it's keystones. And like, so all of you need to find this, and the basic setup is for each of these episodes will be that, one of the Toa goes and try and find the Makoki stone, and at the end of it, they've got it, but then, oh no, something happens, and it's a cliffhanger, and then the next episode is one of the other Toa shows up, saves them, and then they pass on the knowledge that, hey, you need to find this Makoki stone until they all, get all the Makoki stones, go to the Great Temple, put the Makoki stones in the center, and a mask of light comes out, and Toa Hordika Anawa uses his Ratuka spinner to encase it in a stone, because they're like, oh, well, if it's, it's shining so much light that it'll attract the Visorak, so we'll just encase it in stone, which is why it was encased in stone in Mask of Light, which they would later bring back to Montanui and hide it there, because that's what the Toa Metro will do with everything, is hide everything for the future. Anyway,
For the time of knowing.
for the time of knowing, for when the time of knowing has come, that is when that would be.
You think it'd be like a closet or something that they could get it out when they need it.
Yeah, they're like, oh, I don't
No, I'm
know.
gonna just yeet this.
I'll just chuck it in the
That's
wall.
where the shrine goes.
Yeah. So this will bring us to Book 9, Web of Shadows, which once again is a weird, kind of talks about the first parts, or the later half of Book 7, early half of Book 8 a little bit, where the Toa. The one thing I don't like though is with the movie, they made Vakama just a lot more cocky. And they characterized Vakama as just really cocky, where he's like, guys, we defeated the Makuta. Nothing can stop us. Come on. Are we going to go save the Matoran or what? He just seems really cocky. But in the books, he's described more as he's obsessed. He's obsessed with saving the Matoran out of some kind of guilt or something. And it's just driving everyone else insane. Not that he's cocky.
Yeah.
He's just it doesn't matter what danger is out there, we're going to push through it. Not that, oh, we can take on anything.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit of a character difference between those there. But the movie pretty much goes from them being on the beach and walking into the city, and instead of doing all the stuff they did in Book 7, they just immediately get captured and then transformed, and then they're turned into the Hordika, and the Rahaga save them. And then they tell them about Kitangu, and then Rudaka is talking to one of the spiders, the Visorak, and is talking about how it's like, these Toa, I really need them to unleash Makuta. He's like, but I wonder if I can get one of them to join me. Vakama eventually gets to a point where they're all getting frustrated because they're not finding any real clues on where Kitangu is, or even if Kitangu is real, because nobody knows if the Kitangu really is real. And Iruni likes to point that out a lot. So Vakama at one point just storms off because he's all huffy and he's pouty and grouchy. And a Muwaka ends up coming by, one of the giant tiger cats, and like growls like it's gonna fight, and he just totally lets loose this huge growl and just roars at it and scares it off. Like letting out this huge, this primal Rahi side of him out. He's just like caving into this inner darkness. Also, you have to remember too, so another weird parallel we'll start to see is this is about the year that Revenge of the Sith also came out, and so we start like seeing like once again everything is like a product of this time where you get like these characters who become tragic.
Anakin.
Yeah, he's becoming Anakin Skywalker more or less. Yes.
But I thought you said that pretty much the majority of the timeline was written back in like 2001.
The majority of the large key points were written back in 2001. Like intricate, smaller details, like characterization of certain things.
Like the nuance?
Yeah, nuance of them wasn't really written. But like main big plots, like the Great Cataclysm, the Great Rescue, what will come after this, the quest for the masks, the mask of like these big note markers, like those were kind of already thought of, but not so much the details that would really be in them. Like some were, but this is like a smaller characterization thing, I'd say. So this was, I definitely think, more based on its time. And he ends up getting captured by Visorak. He gets captured by Visorak and, is brought to Rudaka. And Rudaka is, and this is another thing too, is like if you watch this scene in the movie, you're like, oh, they are heavily sexualizing the hell out of her and try to make her this kind of like, once again, it's Bayonetta Bionicle. And trying to like seduce Vakama into joining her because she is going to betray King Simperak and take over the Visorak hordes, and he could be her king and the Visorak ruler. And he's like, oh yeah, he's like, I don't need friends, I don't need anyone. And
I just need boobies.
Yeah, pretty much. So he joins Rudaka, and Rudaka takes him to King Simperak and introduces him and says, oh, he's joined us. But before this, Norik has gone running off to find Vakama and can't find him, and he gets lost in like this dark cavern. And Vakama basically is just like talking from the shadows and being really super like ominous and whatever. And Norik is like, no, you guys, you need to focus on your mission. Like, if you lose focus of that, you'll give into your Rahi side and all this stuff. And Vakama's like, don't care, shows up in front of him and is like, boom, and just scares the bejesus. And he's like, well, what are you going to do? He's like, nothing. I'm not here to do anything, but just let you know. And then goes off. And then Vakama goes on to kidnap all the other Rahaga and bring them to King Simperak as like, a present for you, my king. And King Simperak is like, oh yes, Vakama, what was your name, Vakama? Ah yes, worthy name indeed. Yes, Visorak, you will now also listen to his commands and be helpful. He's like, anything for you, my king, double winking over at Rudaka, who in the corner is like, so it is at this point that Norik returns to the other, to Hordika, and they're like, has anyone seen Vakama? He's like, yeah, he's betrayed us. And he's captured the other Hordika, so we don't really have any option. We've got to go to the Colosseum. We're going to have a showdown. And they're like, all right, well, there's not much we can do. Also, like, right around this time, they go a little further, and they actually do find the Kitanongu, who is, if I can not knock everything over, this dude right here, the Kitanongu, the Rocky boy who just drops stuff off of him here. Kitangu is a Rahi. His Rotika spinner can neutralize any poison or anything there. He is an intelligent Rahi who is also capable of speech. He has like this, like, in the movie they say it's like a hammer, what this thing is, but it's a rotating like shield that can absorb any attack coming into him, and then he can fuel himself off that and send another attack out.
It's like a Morning Star shield.
Yeah, I know, exactly. This was a big thing they did in the Titan sets, where they had like these rotating, spinny things. Like Hordika has one too. I think Simperak just has like a backhand claw, so backhand bitches. But anyway, so they're like, oh, we found him. We found Kitongu. Will you help us? And he's like, no. And they're like, what? And so the Rahaga speak to Kitongu and you go, okay, well, here's the deal. Basically, Kitongu says that while he can change any counteract any poison or whatever, you guys haven't made peace with the Rahi sides of yourself, and before he can actually do anything, you have to like get a major one-sided winning thing. So you need to make peace with you guys being Rahi and stuff, per Rahi, and make peace with that and earn your powers there, and then he will be able to do it. And they're like, okay. And then they get the whole news that Vakama has turned traitorous and whatever, so they're gonna go storm the castle, the Colosseum, and they go, Kitongu, will you fight with us? And Kitongu's like, hell yeah. Because Kitongu was actually the last of his own species. He was forced from his home that was taken over by the Visorak hordes. So he has no love for the Visorak and pretty much just exists at this point to destroy the Visorak hordes and Ruthada and Simperak. So Tomatru show up to the Colosseum, and here comes out Vakama. He's like, it's good you guys saved us the trouble of looking for you. Now we can kill you ourselves. And they're like, and Matau so normally where Anawa was like the anti-Vakama person the entire time, Matau has been the anti-Vakama person this entire time. And he has kind of like reflected on this and realized Vakama is just doing the best he can, and that they've all been hard on each other and maybe not hurt each other out as much, and that no one is probably hurting as much as Vakama is because he feels the most responsible for everything bad that's gone wrong. So Matau was like, look, he's like, you don't have to do this. Like, I'm sorry that I was so against you and all this stuff. We know you're trying to be good, and Vakama's just not having it. He's like, 1v1 me then. And so Matau scales the tower and comes to fight Vakama, and meanwhile a bunch of Visorak hordes are coming into Colosseum. The other Toa, Hordika and the Rahaga are fighting them, and Matau is very much losing this fight with Vakama because Vakama is going in for the kill. He is fighting because he doesn't care, and Matau is on the edge, holding by his fingertips, and he's like, Vakama, I'm sorry that I did all this stuff. I hope you can forgive me, but we need to save the Matoran. That's what we need to do, and appeals to Vakama's humanity and wins out. And Vakama goes, you're right. He's like, I'm sorry. Once Matoran gang, always Matoran gang. And he helps Brother Matau up and goes, all right. He's like, but don't let anyone know that I haven't betrayed you guys. And Matau goes, oh yeah? He's like, oh yeah. Big brain plan time. And so as this is happening, Simperak and Ruthada are sitting up at the top of the tower, and they keep hearing this boom, boom, boom sound, and Sidorak's like, whoa, what's that? And it's the Kitanongu, just scaling up the tower, just one arm, scale, and he's like, Kitongu. And he's like, oh, Hordika, why don't you do something about that? And she's like, she's like, do it yourself. And he's like, okay. He just fires like a little laser down and knocks the Kitanongu off. And anyway, Kitanongu keeps climbing up back and shows up, and he's like, square up. Because he is a wide boy. And Simperak was like, oh, Hordika? Because Sidorak is not particularly strong. He's just really been good at stealing other people's credit for years. For years and years and years, he's been really good at stealing people's credit. I mean, the Visorak hordes doing a lot of the stuff for the most part. Like, a lot of those ideas were actually Hordika's, but he just interjected himself because they were both trying to get Makuta's favor. And he just interjected himself, like, oh, I came up with that idea. It was me. And Makuta was like, good, you get promoted. You're going to be king of Visorak. And Hordika, you can be viceroy, I guess. It's whatever. And Hordika at this point is just like, take care of it yourself. And throws him the staff, and he's like, oh. And then the Kitanongu sends Simperak to horny jail and just bonks him really hard and squishes him flat, just kills him. Hordika's off, doing whatever. So back down at the bottom, Hordika shows up. The other Toa Hordika had been captured by this point. And here comes Vakama bringing Matau. Throws him down with the others. He's like, I've captured the last one of these dirty Toa, my queen. And she's like, good, Vakama. Now, we can use them. And Vakama, like, helps all the Toa out real quick and goes, except it is I who am going to be fighting you now. And she's like, with what army? And then, in the biggest big dick baller move that Vakama goes, because Sidorak is dead now. The Vakama, the Visorak hordes were allegiant to Sidorak. But Sidorak also put out an order that they would be allegiant to Vakama. He never did that for Hordika. He never did. And so Vakama goes, hey, all of you, Sidorak is dead. I am the captain now. Look at me. I am the captain now. And he goes, scream, get out of here, leave as far as the horizons will go. And all the Visorak just look at each other, and they're like, oh shit, we don't have to listen to Hordika anymore? Let's get out of here, boys! And they all just, mass exodus of Visorak from the city. And Hordika's like, all right, you haven't won yet. And he's like, oh yeah? And then all the Toa Hordika charge up the Rutuka spinners, hit Hordika right with them, and which is all elemental energy. This is important. And Hordika has a piece of the protodermic prison from Makuta in her breast.
Between the titties.
Between the titties, right over the heart light. And Vakama goes, all right. And she's like, is that all you got? And he goes, nope, but this is. And at this point, the Rahaga immediately understand what's happening. They're like, Vakama, no, it's already too late. He's already shot her with the elemental Rutuka spinner. Hits her right in the chest and sends her flying back. The crystal piece destroys. Makuta has been freed from his prison.
Yeah.
Because, once again, before, what the Toa can create, the Toa can destroy. And the Toa Hordika realize this. And they're like, we've paid a terrible price for this, but we've gotten rid of the Visorak. They're like, we know we're going to have to deal with Makuta again. And Vakama's like, yeah, we probably won't see his ugly mug for a while, though. We banged him up pretty much last time, so at least we'll get a little bit of time. So it's from here that Nuju, so they go to the Kitangu, and now all the Toa Hordika make peace with the Rahi inside of them, and they ask Kitangu to turn them back into their original forms. And Kitangu says, well, you've made peace with your Rahi selves, like, you're possibly even stronger than you were before. Why would you want to do that? And they go, well, we made a promise to save the Matoran, and we have to be in our original forms for that. And he goes, okay, and bam, hits him with the Rutuka spinner, because Kitangu's Rutuka spinner can counteract any poison. Quick note on that, Sidorak's Rutuka spinner allowed him to just put people under an obedience spell for 24 hours. Hordika's Rutuka spinner could horribly mutate people. And she uses that a lot. And I'll talk about that in a little bit in a second. But it was at the end here that the Toa Metru, they go, okay, well, the path by sea isn't great to go by, so let's build a bunch of blimps in air and we'll transport the Matoran that way. And they all go to do that. And that is the end of book 9, with the caveat that at the very end of it, there is a journal from Takua, which is weird because he's Takanuva now, so I don't know why they made it as a journal of him as Takua talking about it. The Vakama talked about the Rahaga. The Rahaga used to be at one point a Toa team known as the Toa Haga, and what they were an elite squad of Toa, pulled and chosen from prior other Toa teams, given with special armor and weapons of gold and silver coloring, that their masks were carved into the masks of like legendary heroes, and their jobs were basically to guard the Makuta, which most of the time meant that they would just fight a lot of Rahi, because they were beneath Makuta having to fight. Yes?
Were there toys of those?
Yes, there were. There were actually 2. Because
they're the best of the best of the best.
I mean, they look really cool compared to, like, they have these cool shields with them. They got these cool spears.
Spartan helmets.
Yeah, I mean, they're pretty sick. So there was only 2 because, so this is an interesting theory, is that, so with Toa Haga Norik, his mask looks exactly like Taraga Duma's. So some people believe that, and this is a thing that it gets debated about a lot, but Greg Farshty talked about is that at one point very early on in the thing, there was an idea that, okay, we're going to be making these guys, what should they be? And someone put out the idea that this would be Turaga Duma when he was a Toa, because of the same mask there, and that this would be Nadiki, because the mask is very similar to that thing there, and so people like to say that that's really what it was, but Greg Farshty is still very adamant that no, it was just an idea for half a second. We already had ideas of other stuff we were going to make it. Yes, Zach.
1 hour mark.
Okay. We can still keep going, yeah? Cool. Do we want to take a break here for the purposes of
How much
editing?
time you got? How much time?
I mean, it's going to be another 30 minutes or so. All right. We're back from break, and we're going to be over the last thing we're going to be going over today, and this is the 10th book in the series, Time Trap. One quick thing before that, real quick, we briefly touched on it before break, was that there were only 2 of these Toahaga made, and so the reason for that is that the Toahaga, like I said, were an elite squad of Toa that were designed to protect Makuta, because basically they were Rahi, and they would just deal with that, because Makuta was above that. What happened is that the Toahaga at one point found out that the Brotherhood of Makuta had stolen the Great Kanohi Mask of Light from another big group known as the Brotherhood of, or the Order of Motunui, which is a super secret organization. Like the Brotherhood of Makuta and the Dark Hunters are organizations that everybody generally knows about, but the Order of Motunui is a super secret thing that not a whole lot of people know about. They found out that the Brotherhood of Makuta was actually even their special Toa tools and stuff they'd gotten were made by Matoran who were coerced under threat of their lives by the Brotherhood of Makuta. And so they joined up together to storm the Brotherhood of Makuta's fortress to steal the Kanohi of Oki, the great Kanohi Mask of Light. But unfortunately, the Gaki, Bomonga, Pokes, and Qualis got captured, and only Toa Iruni and Toa Norik were able to escape. Quick note on that, Toa Iruni has the Great Kolasi, Great Kanohi Kolasi, I believe it is the Great Mask of, I think it's, I can't remember if it's teleportation or it's distance traveling or something like that. Basically, the way the mask works is if there's something in your line of sight that you can see, you can just instant transmission over to it. But you can only travel to places that you can physically see in front of you. The Toa Norik wears a Kanohi Pehuki, I believe it's called, but it's carved in the mask of a noble Kanohi Kirill, which is the mask that Turaga Duma wears. The Pehuki allows you to shrink down to about 6 inches, so it is the Great Mask of Diminishment, so you can kind of side shift. As a side note on that, Turaga Duma's mask, the noble Kanohi Kirill, is a noble mask of regeneration, and Turaga Duma would use it to restore fissures and cracks in objects and stuff. In the same way that there was a regeneration Kanoka disc, that's the disc that mask is made from. And the reason why there was only 2 is because only 2 Toa managed to make it out, but they go back in after hiding the Kanohi of Oki to come in back and save the other Toahaga, but Rudaka had gone and just used her Ratuka Spinner to mutate all of the Rahaga and mutated all of them together to make them kind of as a sick joke of this kind of there's some weird mix of a Rahaga or a Rahi and a Turaga with the idea to just crush their spirits. She thought it was more enjoyable to just try and crush their spirits, that they were supposedly these great Toa, and now look what they can do. They can't do anything. Joke's on her. Because she's lying on the ground, almost dead. Spoiler alert, Makuta managed to find her and kind of resurrected her a little bit for being such a loyal, good subject. So, this brings us to Book 10, Time Trap, which is notably, Greg Farshty said this was his favorite book to write. And it picks up right after the end of Web of Shadows, where all the Toa have gathered up all of the Matoran spheres, and they're gonna head back to the island of Motunui. Vakama, however, says, "Hey guys, I have to stay here in Metronui. There's one last thing I've got to do." And they're like, Vakama, like, come on, man, like, let's just go. Like, don't worry about the Makuta. Because they're like, we need to go. Like, there's no reason to stay here. You know, we can deal with anything up there. And Vakama goes, guys, he's like, look, you guys must have forgotten about something really important. They're like, what did you forget? Vakama, did you like forget like your favorite disc or your favorite mask making tool? He's like, no, something a lot more important. The Mask of Time. He's like, it's still underwater somewhere. He's like, we can't risk it that Makuta or some other force might get that mask. Like, we can't risk it, so I'm gonna go alone and do this. And the others are like, oh, you know, I don't think that's a good, you know, Vakama, you don't have to do, and he's like, no, he's like, you guys, he's like, look, if I'm wrong and there's nothing there, then at worst, I just die alone to some Rahi or whatever. But at best, or, at best, that's how that works there. But at worst, if Makuta or some other being finds it and I find it there, I'm just going to be able to buy you guys a lot more time to get to Matsunui, save the Matoran, and then be able to deal with it. And they all kind of agree. Is at this point that...
save time.
Yeah.
From Makuta getting the time mask.
Yes. So at this point, Nuju starts speaking in clicks and whistles and making slashing motions in the air. And Matau is like, what is that? And Nokama was like, he says that he's speaking the language of the Rahi. It's something he picked up of Qualis. And Toa Matau goes, you know what? That sounded like an insult. And I would dare him to say it again, but I still wouldn't understand it. And they all kind of have a good laugh. And this is a very lighthearted moment for everyone because they've been through so much heavy stuff that now they're like, we're actually doing it. We've actually come together. Even despite us not being destined to be Toa, we've got it. All right. So we're going to go and head out. Vakama, we'll see you later. So Vakama goes, immediately dives into the Silver Protoderma Sea. And he's swimming around for hours. And he's thinking, he's like, you know what? Maybe there isn't anything here. Maybe it just got washed away or something else. Like, who even knows? So he goes up to go back for a breath of air. When he sees in the distance in the water, he's like, something is different. And in this weird area, there's like these pulses of like energy where all of a sudden schools of fish are just suddenly living out their entire lives and turning to dust. And then more fish, and then just reforming. And like even like all the vegetation underwater is just growing rapidly and then just shrinking and shriveling and dying. And then doing the same thing over again. He goes, yeah, that looks like a time distortion to me if I've ever seen one. He's like, all right, I'm going to have to... So he starts swimming a little closer, being careful to avoid this, and he sees that the Kanohi-Vahi has a crack in it, which means this time energy is leaking out of it, which Vakama is like, that shouldn't be how it works. He's like, everyone knows that if a Kanohi mask is damaged like that, like it loses all of its powers. And then he's like, oh wait, it is a great Kanohi, it is a legendary mythical Kanohi mask, so of course it would work. And it tampers with one of the fundamental, fabrics of nature. It's like, of course it would still work even if the mask crack. It's like, so he's thinking about it, he's like, okay, there's no way I'll be able to carry it and transport it back to somewhere else where I can, really safely do it, repair it. I'm just going to have to repair it underwater. So he kind of is like timing himself in between these pulses. Yeah.
Is he holding his breath this whole time?
Yes. He's doing his best to hold his breath. He's going back up for air every now and then. So he decides at this point he's going to dive back down, work in between the time fluctuations to not get hit, and sends out a bolt of fire to kind of like weld the mask piece back together. Also at this point it is noted that the Kanohi-Vahi, that's just been underwater for so long, has turned in orange. This is why the original Kanohi-Vahi is an orange color, and the one they revised for it when they released in Metro Nui is a golden color, because it was originally gold, but being exposed to the elements, it has turned orange. And so he grabs the Kanohi-Vahi, it's all fixed up, and he goes back up for air, and because he's like, oh man, I'm losing it, and so he's immediately like starting to drown. But he makes it back up, and he gets slammed up into the rocks, and there's this large figure above him, and he goes, help me! And the figure takes the Kanohi-Vahi and walks off, and Vakama blacks out. This is where we cut over to a fortress on some island, where there is a large, just tall, menacing being sitting on his throne, and gets up, and he's recounting that not too long, he's like, I'm really kind of mad. I'm really kind of mad right now because I sent Nadiki and Kreka to Metro Nui because Makuta asked me to, and they haven't returned yet, which leads to the possibility that they have been killed. Now, I don't really care about Nadiki. He was a traitorous Toa who never wanted to be a Dark Hunter in the first place, was willing to try and leave with it. Yes?
So confirmed he was a traitorous Toa. and confirmed that our first interaction ever seeing Toa Khan is saying you lost the right to call me brother a long time ago. But that's not Nadiki.
Yes, that is why a lot of people believe that that was going to be like, because even then, like, okay, here it is. Toa Khan also has like these gold bits of armor here and there, so that also leads to a lot of credence that people thought that, you know, if we know that Nadiki was a Toa on the same team as Toa Khan, so a lot of people, that gives more credence to like, oh, that was, you know, he's a green, and Nadiki was green, so he's probably an air Toa then, so that was probably designed for it, so it's a contentious point. But yes, confirmed, Nadiki was a Toa. He, at some point, betrayed his Toa team, joined the Dark Hunters, and was traitors in general, and nobody liked him. And the only reason they kept Kreka with him, because they go, well, you know, Nadiki was a traitorous Toa, and I didn't really like him much anyway, but, you know, and he won't be missed. And Kreka was just an idiot. He was strong, but the only thing that made him really valuable was his unyielding sense of loyalty that he just had, and he kept Nadiki in line. He's like, neither of them will be really missed. What is more insufferable is that someone killed some of the Dark Hunters who work under me. That is an offense that cannot be tolerated, especially under Maguda, which only leads me to believe that some Toa team must have killed them. I'm going to go to Metro, and so he's like, so I need to figure this out. So he has like this scribe that's writing down all his words, and he goes,
Like a Matoran?
no, it's some other monster. So the Dark Hunters are, once again, this organization of just various different species, some ex-Toa, some Vortex, like Hordika. Hordika at one point was a part of the Dark Hunters, and she did betray them and joined the Brotherhood of Makuta as a secret agent for the Brotherhood of Makuta while working as a Dark Hunter. And this gets a lot muddier later. But it's all these different species, and they're all basically, the rules of the Dark Hunters are thus. Anyone can join the Dark Hunters, but if you join the Dark Hunter, you will take on any mission as long as the payment is reasonable. And that no one leaves the Dark Hunters. If you leave the Dark Hunter, you're getting killed. But if someone kills a Dark Hunter, that warrants their death too. So he goes, you know, scribe, he's like, send word for Centrak, who is more or less like a pet, who's just like, this basically this character's bodyguard. The character's name is the Shattered One. Nobody really knows his real name, and nobody spoke it for long enough for anyone to care to remember, or has been jumpy enough to try. And so, send word to Centrak, we head for Metro Nui to figure out what this is. Because clearly, these Toa must have killed Nadiki and Kreka. And if that means that these Toa have lost the fear that they once had of the Dark Hunters, and it is time to remind them. And the scribe is like, oh, you're going to go yourself, not send somebody else? Like, I mean, your magnificence, you're only second in power to the Makuta. And he just immediately grabs him by the throat. He's like, second to? No. That sniveling, conniving piece of shit Makuta is nothing compared to me. And just instead of killing him, just anime throws him through a wall. And the scribe is like, oh man, this is a fate better than death at least. And he goes, see to it. So he walks outside into the courtyard, and there's this female who is doing a series of she's just throwing knives at a mounted Moaka head. Just throwing knives, and doing all sorts of like a series of acrobatic tricks and jumps and spins and stuff. And the Shadowed One is like, kind of impressed. And he goes, oh, I thought you preferred to work with live targets. She's like, yep, I did. They're all out in the front. Probably want to get rid of them before the smell hits you. And then he notices that the blades have also been coated in a poison. And he is impressed. And he's like, all right. He's like, so how'd your mission go? She goes, he's like, the Toa? And she's like, killed. He's like, the Taraga? Fled. The payment? In the vault. He's like, details? He's like, typical Toa of Gravity. He's like, showed up, saw Toa of Gravity, did what Toa of Gravity first do. Starts to make everything way less around them. So I already knew that I was going to have to fight them, and so I trained to fight in zero gravity using levitation discs. And he didn't know what to deal with that, but I did. And so he's like, good. And he's like, I'm going to be off for a bit. And she throws a knife directly at him. And he throws the knife right back and knocks it out. And she's like, oh, going somewhere yourself? And he's like, yes, I have things to tend to. She's like, going any place in particular? He's like, that's not important. He's like, when will you back? He's like, as soon as I do. And she's like, all right. And he's like, listen, there's another, I can't remember the other Dark Hunter's name that he mentions. He's like, like, so-and-so Dark Hunter, you need to teach him a lesson when he comes back. He was supposed to bring 3 payments for this one mission, and only 2 have been put in the vault, so I need you to search his room and then teach him a lesson for stealing. And she goes, what kind of regiment are we talking? And he's like, I want to make sure he's able to still walk, just, injured and crushed for about 6 weeks. And she goes, hands? And he's like, I would prefer to him to keep his hands. I've had to chop off enough hands this year. Noting that Lariska, one of her arms is entirely mechanical. Probably because of the shattered one.
What? Are they not mechanical already? Are they
Remember, they're bioorganic, they're biomechanical.
Uh-huh.
So they have what is essentially like a mechanical exoskeleton.
Okay.
And then like a regular skeleton and then muscle stuff. But her arm is completely mechanical. One of them are. Yeah. It is a prosthetic. And so he goes, all right. He's like, now, I'll be off, but Lariska, if I turned my back right now, I wouldn't happen to find a knife in it from you, would I? And she laughs. She's like, no. How'd that before? I was just playing. She's like, I know better than to throw anything at you while you've got your back turned. Because if you have your back turned to anyone, it means that you already have someone waiting in the shadows to protect someone else. When I kill you, you'll be able to see it coming right at you, so I can watch you die. And he goes, good. And then leaves. Like, that is the atmosphere that the Shadow One has created within the Dark Hunters. They are all...
So very similar to the Ellen DeGeneres.
It is all, at any point, if you think you are strong enough to come and kill me, I offer you the invitation to.
Assassination.
Yeah, it's like I offer you at any point. It's like everyone is basically out for each other. You're like, at any point, you're more than able to try and come and take my head at your own risk. And I encourage it, because he wants to keep them on their chest. So anyway, so he grabs up Sentrak and they head off for Metru Nui. It's at this point that that Vakama is kind of stirring in his sleep, and he wakes up and he's like, oh, where am I? He's like, I don't hurt, and my Toa armor is gone, and I'm in a bed? What's going on? And he gets up and he realizes that he is Matoran again. And this is really weird. He looks around, and all of a sudden, Jala comes into the door. He goes, Vakama, where are you? Vakama, are you awake? And Vakama wakes up, and he's like, Jala? Is that you? He's like, yeah, Akalini head. He's like, are you going to be late for work? And he's like, work? He's like, yeah, that thing that you have to do before the Vaki get here? The thing that Takua hates? And Vakama's also...
The duty part of the Unity duty destiny.
Yes. And Vakama's like thinking, he's like, oh man, yeah, Takua. He's like, Takua lives right by my house. I wonder how Takua is doing. But wait, hold on. No, I was a Tometru and all this stuff. He goes, what's going on? He's like, what happened? He's like, look, the Toa, we've got to get more out there now. It's like, the Vaki are a lot more in patrol since the new Toa puts new laws into place with Taraga Duma and Taraga Lakan. And Vakama's like, wait, what? He's like, Taraga Duma and Taraga Lakan, new Toa, Jala, who is the Toa of Fire? And Jala goes, Toa Nuri, of course. And Vakama is immediately like trying to figure this out, because he's like, maybe someone used the Mask of Time to cause some weird temporal distortion or send things back to time. That wouldn't make any sense, because Makuta destined us to be. That doesn't make sense. So he's walking through his day, and so he goes, okay, I'm going to go to Kometru. And he goes to try and find, what's his name? Nuju. And he makes his way into the tower, and they're like, oh no, you can't go up there. He's like, look, I've got a part here, it's a super great telescope, we'll let you see like 100 times better. And they're like, ooh, we can see stars 100 times better? Yeah, sure, go, whatever, man, I don't care. Walks into the room, Nuju's like looking at whatever. He's like, if you have something, leave it. If you don't, go ahead and leave. I don't have anything to say. If you can't bring it with you, I don't know how you brought it up here. And and he turns over, he's like, oh, you're Vakama. You're the one who made my telescopic lens on my mask. And he's like, look. And he starts recanting the whole thing, and he's like, and Nuju's like, what are you talking about? He's like, me? A Toa? Never, ever. I don't know what you're talking about. What are you talking about? And he's like, look, I made this great mask. He's like, wait, Vakama, you actually made it? You made the great mask of time? And he's like, yes. He's like, do you know any information about... Is there anything in the story? He's like, I'm sure we could look for something like Great Mask of Time, but it'd really be hard to see. It'd be a lot easier if you could just show me where the Mask of Time is. If you had the Mask of Time on you, I'd be able to maybe look at it a little better. And Vakama's already, the wheels are turning. He's like, something is not right. And as he's talking to him, like for a split second, he's back in reality as a Toa, and there's like the whole like ruined power that he's in, and it splits back into like this vision that he's in. And so at this time, Avaki busts in through the window, and they're just like, "No, man, I swear, I was working. He was just distracted. I could do work." And then zaps him. Vakama's already gone. Vakama makes his way to Gametru, and of course they're like, "Ah, what do you?" And so Toa Visola is there, berating Nokama, and she's like, "Oh, you know you're not allowed to do any experiments without Toa permission. You know you're not supposed to Nokama." And Nokama's like, "Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I won't do it again." She's like, "Yeah, you're not allowed to do that. What do you want, Tomator?" And he's like, "Oh, I just have some parts for the temple I'm bringing." She's like, "I don't have time to deal with a Matoran. I'll see you later, Nokama," and leaves. And like Vakama's like, "That's so weird." And so Nokama immediately starts walking off. He's like, "Hey, Nokama, where are you going?" She's like, back to the temple. Like, I don't want to get yelled at again. He's like, "Well, what were you doing?" She's like, "I was experimenting with, energized protodermis that we've always been, but, ever since the Toa put in the new laws, we can't." He's like, "What new laws did the Toa put in?" He's like, "Well, okay, after the new Toa were transformed into Toa, they convinced Turaga Lakan and Turaga Duma that there wasn't any need for any more Toa, so they outlawed any experiments using energized protodermis without their permission." He's like, I was like, "Look, okay, we need more. I have information." I was like, "Nokama, I need some information to help on Master Time. Do you think there might be any in the Great Temple that might have that?" She's like, I don't know. I'm not really sure." And Vakama was like, "Okay, well, come with me anyway." So they run off to the Great Temple, and they're trying to sneak and find a way in. And Vakama remembers, she's like, "There's no way we can get in." And he's like, "Oh yeah, there's a way." Because he remembered back when he was a Toa Hordika that he had to find some way to crawl into the Great Temple. And does so with going through some chutes, and ends up there. They start looking around, and she goes, "Oh wait, I found something here. There's something about Mask of Time." Because basically, Vakama's looking at these tablets and can't read any of them because he's not a scholar. So he's just kind of looking for anything that resembles the shape of the Mask of Time or anything. And he finds this creature on it. And it's called the Visorak. And the Visorak is a being that was created that has temporal-based powers that was designed by the Dark Hunters to sense that there was any temporal shifts in the world. And if that was, it would go after and hunt the Mask of Time, which Vakama's like, "I think that might have been the thing that, took the Mask of Time before I blacked out." He's like, "Okay, well, that thing probably has it." And Nokama's like, "Yeah, you have the Mask of Time or what?" And he's like, "Oh, yeah, I have the Mask of Time. She's like, "Well, let's go find it, and then we can," and Vakama's like, yeah, Nokama, let's go and find the Mask of Time. That's a good idea." And she's talking about, it's like, "Oh, it's like, what was it? I'm trying to remember. Nokama slips up and says something here that kind of sets Vakama off, and he goes, "Oh yeah, just like all those games of Seek and Find that we've been playing." She's like, "Oh yeah, I beat you at all those games." And Vakama was like, "Yeah, I'm tired of losing. I'm ready to win some." And so they make their way into Pometru, where Vakama knew that there would be a Makuta lair. And he's looking through, they're like, I don't understand why because before that, he's like, "Well, we need to get Matau and, Anua and Wenua." And she's like, "That's not funny." He's like, "What?" He's like, "Matau was killed last month in a shoot. The Morbuzak vines got in and destroyed it. And he died in that." And he's like, "Well, what about Anua?" He's like, "Anua was doing something, and the Vaki, gathered him up, and he hasn't been the same since. Whatever they do to him, all he does is he goes straight to work and goes straight home every day now." He's like, "Oh, this is not good." So they make their way to Pometru, and they're examining the caves before where the Makuta lair was, because he knows, and he's feeling on the wall looking for where this is going to be. And she's like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Oh, I'm just looking for something where." Nokama starts talking about, it's like, "Oh, we need to get this Mask of Time." And he's like, "Well, what if the Mask of Time is be used for Matoran?" He's like, "Well, the Matoran would want it to be used by superior beings to, for their benefit, because the superior beings would actually know what is right." And Vakama was like, And meanwhile, the Shadow One is kind of watching in the distance with Sentrak. And he's like, "That's weird. Why is a Toa walking with a Visorak right by its side?" What? He's like, "Yes." He's like, "When you can't attack the person, you attack the mind. I've seen this before." He's like, we'll keep following them and see where they lead us. And as they were walking through the actual sea gates, he spotted a great Kenohi mask on the ground, and he goes, "You see what this is, Sentrak? This is a great Kenohi mask, one of the great weapons of a Toa. It was probably used by some Toa who died valiantly to try and seal off sea gates, but do you think they were a hero when their body was tossed in the sea?" Yes, Zach.
5 minutes.
Okay. So one thing leads to another. Vakama's looking through the walls, and he finds opens the door, and he goes, "This is where it is. This is where it's supposed to be." And one of those face hugger things jumps on his face again, and he starts seeing a distant future where Krakua, that Toa of Sonic's that someone made up before, this is where he's written into the story. And he's like,
the fortress?
yes. And he's like, Vakama, he's like, "Who are you?" He's like, "My name is Krakua, I'm a Toa of Sonic's." He's like, "Listen, you have to understand that my future only exists if you succeed, but you have to be ready to give up everything and fail if that is the case." And he's like, "I don't understand." He's like, "There's only so much I can show you in the future. You know, even Toa are bound by and whatever." So next thing he knows, it's been the thing has been pulled off of him. It's called the Kratana, by the way. It looks like a mix between the Krana and the Krata. And Taraga Lakan is pulling it off. He's like, "Oh, hey, Vakama, I saved you." He's like, "Oh yeah, because he's like, you pulled it off just in time. Because I might have learned a lot more." And he takes a disc and he throws it right at Taraga Lakan, and he just phases through Nokama. And so as soon as that happens, Nokama just disperses, and all of a sudden the reality starts to come in because his belief of this made up thing is no longer there. And standing in front of him is Makuta. And he is like, "Oh, what's up, Vakama?" He is like, and Vakama and Makuta are just spitting fire back at each other. They're just talking smack with each other. And he's like, "Look, listen, Vakama, you're going to help me get back the Kenohi Vahi, because the Shadowed One has it right now." He's like, "Why would I help you with that?" He's like, "I hate both of you guys, and I would rather give it to them than give it to you." And he's like, "Vakama, if they do that, and they've taken the Vahi, and they'll rule over your destroyed city, you won't be able to save them torn." He's like, the city is ruined because of you. The Matoran are in prison because of you. The Vahi only exists because you convinced me to do it. He's like, "This is as much your fault as anything else. Why would I want to help you?" And he goes, "All right, little shit, listen here. I'm bigger than you, I'm stronger than you. I don't have time for this. Let's go and get the Kenohi Vahi." And he goes, "Okay, cool." So he's like, "But outside right now is Voparak." He's like, "What the hell is Voparak?" He's like, "Oh, remember that thing, the time distortion thing?" He's like, "Okay." He's like, "Watch." He's like, "Go ahead and deal with it." And Vakama's like, he's like, "Look, that thing is a pawn, and only pawns should take care of other pawns, Vakama, so do your thing." Vakama starts shooting firebolts at him, and they just immediately phase out of existence once they get to like a meter of him. And he's like, "I don't understand." He goes, "Vakama, watch." He takes a big old rock and tosses it at Voparak, and it disintegrates into dust. And he's like, "It's a time stasis field. He's a being of time manipulation, so anything that gets too close to him just vaporizes and lives out its entire existence in seconds." He goes, "Well, how am I supposed to fight that?" And he goes, "We're not." So all of a sudden he just summons, he's like, "Watch this." All of a sudden, thousands of rock sheep just start pouring out of this canyon, all just marching towards Voparak. Getting within the distance, and as soon as they get too close, the armor just disintegrates, the Krata disintegrates, and Makuta goes, "They are my sons, born of me. In each part of these rock sheep is part of me, and they exist only to serve me." And Vakama's like, "If you had this army of rock sheep, why would you need anything destroyed to take? You could just take over the city." He's like, "If I use this army of rock sheep, I wouldn't have a city to rule." He's like, "You gotta use a little bit of tact, Vakama." And so he's like, "You just think of everything you." And he's like, "Vakama, my plans are so deep and complex, they would melt your mind if you even tried to comprehend them." So it's at this point that they have decided that they are going to go try and find the Shadowed One. And I guess we'll cut it for here and pick up on the rest of Time Trap next time. All right.